Chapter 205. On the morning of the second day, as the sun shone into the bungalow, Gu Nan, who had been meditating for the whole night, slowly got up. Before he could move, there was a knock on the door. "Who is it?" Gu Nan did not make a sound, and the power of shadows gradually spread out. But before his shadow could reach the door was pushed open. It was not Zhou Jingwen. She did not have the guts. It was a woman that Gu Nan had never seen before. She looked to be about 17 or 18 years old. She was wearing plain casual clothes, and her hair was loose and wrinkled on her shoulders. It seemed that she was not interested in taking care of it. Her appearance was also ordinary. If there was something special about her, it was probably that pair of fiery red eyebrows. On an otherwise normal face, this peculiarity was very conspicuous. Gu Nan did not know why he was looking at this woman's appearance so carefully. It seemed that she had a natural ability. As long as she stood there, she would be imprinted in the depths of the souls of all living beings. "Who are you?" This strange phenomenon caused Gu Nan to have a bad premonition as he spoke in a low voice. "Red, my name is Red." The girl spoke. Even her voice and intonation were not special, but the sentence pattern was a bit strange. It seemed that she had not spoken for a long time. Gu Nan looked her up and down and said, "What do you want?" "I heard that you are looking for Shadow Song. Help me do something, and I can tell you where Shadow Song is." Red's voice was still very calm, and there was no difference in tone or timbre from before. It was almost like it was synthesized. "Sure." Gu Nan practically didn't hesitate in the slightest as he immediately agreed, and he didn't even ask what he had to do. This was a player's habit. They would first receive the task. As for whether they could complete it or not, that was another matter. If they could not complete it, they would just let it lie in the task window. Red seemed to be a person with a strange temper. She did not care about Gu Nan's credibility and immediately said, "Shadow Song is in the deepest part of the Duanmu family's ancestral tomb. It is a scimitar." "Another Duanmu clan's ancestral tomb?" Gu Nan nodded. Even though he already knew about this clue, Red's words helped him confirm the connection between the two, and it was still very useful. "After Shadow Song's master awakens, protect her. That's what I want you to do. If the protection period is long, your information isn't worth the price." Gu Nan frowned. He was telling the truth. He didn't want to go back on his word. When it came to missions, Gu Nan was a trustworthy person. Reputation was the foundation of a player's reputation. Casually wasting one's reputation would drag down the entire NPC faction's reputation, causing many quests to go unaccepted. Red was a very interesting person. She thought for a moment and said, "The Master of Shadow Songs has the ability to enter the path of stars. You can also enter with him as a reward." "Deal." Gu Nan's eyes lit up. In the evening, Zhou Jingwen excitedly ran into the house, holding a thin piece of paper in her hand. It looked like it was torn from somewhere. "Senior, I found a clue about Shadow Song," she shouted as soon as she came in. Zhou Jingwen was a very smart girl. She knew that words were no proof, and the senior might not believe her, so she secretly tore off the information and brought it with her. The paper was handed to Gu Nan. The information on it was quite detailed. Shadow Song was a machete that had been famous since ancient times, but the story of that time was no longer passed down. The last time it appeared was more than 600 years ago. At that time, an extraordinaire obtained it and killed 11 powerhouses of the same rank in a row, becoming the champion of that year's international martial arts tournament. There were no keywords like magic weapon or infamy that Gu Nan expected. Shadow Song seemed to be a very normal powerful weapon. Such a normal weapon doesn't look like a quest item at all. Gu Nan rubbed his chin, feeling that something was wrong. But since that was what was written on the information, Gu Nan could only respect the truth. "Can you find out where it was last dropped?" Gu Nan put down the paper in his hand and asked casually. "Not yet." Zhou Jingwen seemed a little embarrassed, but this wasn't out of Gu Nan's expectations. She was just an ordinary person without any power or influence. It was already good enough that she could find information on Shadow Song in a day. Besides, Gu Nan had just found out about Shadow Song's whereabouts, so he didn't care. Then there's no need to look. Do you know the Duanmu family? Gu Nan asked. Zhou Jingwen shook her head again, which made Gu Nan frown a little. He originally thought that the Duanmu family should be quite famous. Could it be that Zhou Jingwen's level was too low and she couldn't come into contact with them? As if sensing Gu Nan's thoughts, Zhou Jingwen hurriedly said, "Senior, I'll definitely ask around when I get back." Gu Nan nodded, condensed a small black sword, and handed it to Zhou Jingwen. "Keep this sword close to your body, and you'll obtain unparalleled talent." Zhou Jingwen was so excited that she almost jumped up. She bowed repeatedly and said, "Yes. Thank you, senior." After obtaining the small sword, Zhou Jingwen couldn't wait to go back and test its effects. Gu Nan didn't have any intention of keeping her. He just watched her leave with a strange smile on his face. Shadow Song's master? I don't know if I can kill her before she awakens and give Shadow Song a new master. Gu Nan really liked to test the rules, but he didn't plan on taking the risk himself. Thus, Zhou Jingwen became the best substitute. If possible, Gu Nan didn't mind giving Shadow Song an obedient master, one who would listen to him, Gu Nan. With this in mind, Gu Nan once again entered meditation. He mobilized the law of shadows in an attempt to resist the power of the curse and see if he could speed up his recovery. Divine path cultivators weren't easy to deal with, and the power of faith could also suppress magic. Gu Nan didn't plan on looking for trouble with the Duanmu family while he was injured. After all, if he went, he would most likely be digging up someone's ancestral grave. While Gu Nan was quietly lying dormant on planet Huaqiong, an argument also broke out in Xinghai Pavilion. That Gu Nan is already seriously injured. What are you still hesitating for? He killed a member of our Xinghai Pavilion. Are we going to let him roam freely in the Central Star Sector? The golden-clothed lady and her companion were arguing with a group of people, but clearly, no one agreed with their point of view. He's a dangerous person who was able to kill Lan Po despite being seriously injured, an old man said solemnly. Before we confirm that he has lost the ability to fight, the pavilion won't send too many people. That's right. Someone knocked on the table. Golden-clothed, I understand how you feel, but we can't risk the lives of our members. Chapter 206. Most break world people cherish their lives. For elites of that level, if they wanted to, they could run to a small, far-away place and be a local tyrant until the end of their lives. A break world person who did not want to fight was hard to kill unless they had a one-hit kill technique. They could rip space and escape at any time. No one would be able to chase them. Unfortunately, Gu Nan was the kind of person who could one-hit kill. Gold Clothes and the other two had gone to ambush Gu Nan. Not many people knew about it, but now many more knew. 3 people had ambushed one, but one had been killed. What did that mean? It meant that either the enemy had a way to restrict break world people, or he was so fast that Lan Po did not even have time to open up space. Plus, the 9th leader had not been able to stop the enemy. The people of Xinghai Pavilion had a reason to push the blame away. No organization could be completely united. The bigger the organization, the more it was like that. That included the leader of Galaxy, Xinghai Pavilion. Gold Clothes, what do we do now? The purple-clothed man asked. The purple-clothed man's name was Zihe. The 3 of them were wearing tricolored clothing. Even their names were tricolored. It was not a coincidence. The 3 of them had been adopted by their teacher. He had taught them a way to practice together. He had named them tricolored. They were childhood friends, so it was easy to imagine how much they hated Gu Nan, who had killed Lan Po. Gold Clothes' face was cold. He coldly said, "Of course we will find him and kill him." Cheong Flower Planet. There was a loud noise. A shadow was thrown to the ground. He was breathing more than he was breathing. Seeing his life force disappear, everyone gathered around him. Zhou Jingwen, we are all classmates, one of them coldly said to Zhou Jingwen. You are too cruel. That means you could have held back. Why did you beat Li Yu like that? Facing the questioning, Zhou Jingwen just stood on the stage. She coldly laughed and looked down. In a duel, life and death are decided by fate. Did you forget what was written in your elementary school textbooks? The Jade Flower Planet was famous for its duels. Every person who aspired to become a martial artist took dying in the arena as the highest honor. Of course, that was how it was said, but in real life, if both sides were just sparring, very few people would fight to the death. Usually, they would stop at a certain point. People like Zhou Jingwen who were so heavy-handed were more to vent their anger. Moments later, Zhou Jingwen sat alone in the resting room, wearing only a corset and shorts. Her hair was soaked in sweat. Who? She exhaled heavily, took off the gloves on her hands, and wiped the beads of sweat on her forehead. Only then did she feel her blood heat up a little, and her body became warm again. She took the pitch-black sword from the side. The latter no longer looked abnormal, just like a toy sword. But Zhou Jingwen, who had just experienced something, didn't think so. Li Yu didn't have any enmity with her, and they didn't even know each other. It was just that Zhou Jingwen's parents and Li Yu's parents were good friends and often compared them. Whether it was cultural or martial arts, Li Yu had always been stronger, so she became the other family's child in Zhou Jingwen's family. Zhou Jingwen's resentment towards Li Yu probably came from this. But just because of this, even Zhou Jingwen herself didn't feel the need to beat him up like that. Is it because of this? Zhou Jingwen looked at her hand in a daze. The small sword from Gu Nan lay quietly in her palm. That deep black color seemed to be attracting her gaze. Zhou Jingwen still remembered that when she stood in front of Li Yu, everything around her seemed to be blocked, leaving only the enemy in front of her. Her strength increased, her thoughts became clearer, and even her vision became better. Only her blood seemed to be getting colder and colder, as if it was burning coldly. When she came back to her senses, Li Yu had already fallen off the stage, vomiting blood. Is this the price of power? She clenched one fist, but her gaze gradually became firm. If that's the case, then please continue. In the small bungalow, a smile appeared on Gu Nan's face. The power he bestowed to others naturally allowed him to sense the outside world. He saw Zhou Jingwen's change. A person who was unwilling to be lonely couldn't resist the temptation of power. Even if he knew he would lose himself, he would still throw himself into it like a moth to a flame. But Zhou Jingwen was just a chess piece for him to test the strange woman called Red, so he didn't care too much. The progress of using the power of shadow to break the curse was not bad, or that mysterious power was indeed the curse law in Gu Nan's impression. After just a simple test, Gu Nan found a way to break the curse. The power of shadow exploded, and the effect of damage amplification was suddenly erased at a certain moment. Even though the pressure from all directions made the curse take effect again in the blink of an eye, it was enough. Gu Nan's self-healing was so powerful that he instantly healed most of his injuries. The head had basically grown back, and although the other two wounds were still hollow inside, there were no clues from the outside. It's a pity that this loophole can't be used repeatedly. Gu Nan stood up and moved his arms and legs. He complained in his heart, curse masters are so annoying. Even in the game, being a curse master was one of the most annoying paths. This type of ability was not outstanding in terms of attack and defense, but they had one advantage. They had long arms. If a player walked the curse path, then starting from level 2, they would have the ability to kill people from thousands of miles away. They could kill someone by making a straw man at home. And as the level increased, this ability would continue to strengthen, and the curse could be effective for a longer distance, even to the extent that it could cross space. The reason why it was said that curses could restrain the power of breaking the curse was because of this. The enemy would attack from who knows how many space and time, and you couldn't even find where the enemy was. How could you break the curse? But on the other hand, if curse masters did not hide themselves and existed in a society, then to an assassin like Gu Nan, they were no thicker than a piece of paper. Even though he only found a loophole, it was enough for Gu Nan to recover from his injuries, and he just had to wait for the curse to dissipate on its own. Although the curse was powerful, it also had strict restrictions. After knowing the enemy's background, Gu Nan had ways to deal with it. It's time to look for the Duanmu family. Gu Nan's figure moved slightly, and instantly turned into a shadow, disappearing from the room. Although he told Zhou Jingwen to look for them, he never completely trusted the thoughts of others. He still had to complete the mission. Chapter 207. Planet Huaqiong's nightlife was very lively. Technology brought people convenience in practicing martial art. It also brought a lot of entertainment and depravity. Ren Qixuan was sitting alone in the middle of the night. He looked very out of place. He was the genius young master of the Ren family. He became super at 23. If it was not for his little sister dragging him along, he would not have come to a place like this. I will stay here for another half an hour and then go back to practice. Ren Qixuan made up his mind. He coldly looked around. Most of the people who came here were of the same age as him. In Ren Qixuan's heart, he did not think of them as equals. These people, who had fallen into pleasure, did not have the right to be on the same level as him. If one day he entered the break world, the difference between him and them would be like the difference between a god and a human. Are you Ren Qixuan? A voice sounded behind Ren Qixuan. It made him turn his head. It was as if he was surprised that someone would come to talk to him. There were not many people there who knew Ren Qixuan. There were even fewer people who knew him and dared to talk to him. Ren Qixuan turned his head. He saw a normal-looking young man. Seeing he did not answer, he asked again, "Are you Ren Qixuan? Do you know the Duanmu family?" The Duanmu family. Ren Qixuan's eyes froze. He looked very serious. The central system was very prosperous, but even their break world people were above the rest of the world. A family or faction did not have a break world being there. They were on two different levels. In other words, a break world being able to support a faction was enough. The Duanmu family was a super family that had two break world beings. It looks like you know. Perhaps Ren Qixuan's behavior was noticed by the other person. The young man was very happy. He clapped his hands and said, "In that case, can you take me there?" Ren Qixuan had never thought that someone would ask him to lead the way. "Why me?" Ren Qixuan asked. This person made him feel weird. He did not answer him directly. Instead, he tried to test him. He did not expect the young man to bring up another person. Ren Qixuan did not recognize the person. He thought he looked familiar. It was as if he was the boss of a martial arts club. He had met him before. He doesn't know about the Duanmu clan, so I asked him to find someone. The young man continued, "If the person he found knows, then it's fine. If the person he found doesn't know, then I'll kill him." The man could only helplessly smile at Ren Qixuan. Don't ask him why he believed Gu Nan's words, because when he answered that he didn't know, his superior was killed by the other party. Ren Qixuan felt the corner of his mouth twitch. He finally understood what the other party meant. You boom. Before Ren Qixuan could make a move, a shadow suddenly flashed by and instantly sent him flying far away, knocking down several tables in succession. The other people in the nightclub were shocked, especially the few tables that were affected. One by one, they stood up and glared at the young man. This youth was naturally Gu Nan. He was using the simplest method to find the Duanmu clan. F***ck, don't you know to fight outside? You're really not afraid of death. Don't you know where you are? How dare you mess around in Boss Nye's shop? Boss, someone is causing trouble. The young people who came to the nightclub to seek excitement thought that there was a fight. Thus, some glared angrily, while others had the mentality of watching a good show. The legendary boss Nya came very quickly. He didn't need anyone to call him and was already walking over quickly. He was originally sitting at the bar, so of course he came quickly. Boss Nya was a very well-built man wearing a thin vest. One look and it was obvious that he was a powerful martial artist who was not to be trifled with. He didn't see who was sent flying, so he frowned at Gu Nan and said, "Friend, I'm Nya." The next moment, a sword light flashed, and his voice came to an abrupt stop. His head had already slowly slid down. The entire nightclub seemed to have fallen into silence. The boiling voices stopped in an instant, and only the extremely rhythmic music continued to play. Ah! Murder! It was unknown which girl's scream finally ignited the crowd. The raging crowd did not affect Gu Nan at all. He slowly walked forward and quickly arrived at the place where Ren Qixuan had fallen. He picked up this genius young master. "Where is the Duanmu clan?" he continued to ask. Ren Qixuan was obviously not dead. Gu Nan was not stupid enough to personally destroy the clues. Zhou Jingwen quickly walked into the small single-story house. "Senior, the sword you gave me, is it? Senior?" The pitch-black sword in her hand fell to the ground, emitting a crisp sound. Zhou Jingwen looked at the empty room in front of her, and her entire person fell into a daze. "Senior left. Why did he leave just like that? I just experienced the beauty of power. Why did he have to snatch it away just like that?" Zhou Jingwen punched the wall fiercely, and a few cracks instantly appeared on the side of the wall. Blood also seeped out from the back of her hand. Why, her eyes were bloodshot, and her heart was filled with extreme indignation and unforgettable regret. It must be that she had gathered too little information and did not satisfy Senior. "Wait a minute." Shadow Song, the Duanmu clan, under the blue clothes was a corpse with a slightly distorted face. His head had been smashed by someone when he died. Even though it had been repaired, it still looked somewhat strange. Jin Enz, he slowly stood up and walked past Lan Po's morning hall. His destination is Cheong Flower Planet. He slowly walked out and quietly said, "I went back to the 6th star area to investigate. The spacetime tunnel he chose is very far away. There is only Cheong Flower Planet nearby." "I heard the 6th star area is that person's territory?" Jin Yi's eyes looked cold. "Don't cause any more trouble." He knew what she was thinking. What is the point of having a power in the mortal world? If we do anything now, we will only expose ourselves. It was too easy for a world breaker to establish a power. It was just a matter of time. Destroying Xianwang Planet would not affect Gu Nan at all. Jin Yi understood this, but her mind was filled with hatred. She gritted her teeth and said, "Cheong Flower Planet? What is he doing there?" "Don't forget," he said, "one of the 4 people who went to the 6th star area to supervise is the father and daughter of the Duanmu clan." Jin Yi's eyes lit up. She loudly said, "If a God Path cultivator's body is not destroyed, they cannot be killed. He must be going to Cheong Flower Planet to kill them all." Even though they did not know what enmity Gu Nan had with the Duanmu clan, it did not affect their judgment. With such a serious injury, he could not travel through space. He must still be in the star world. He might even be on Cheong Flower Planet. That person must be recuperating and not daring to cause trouble for the Duanmu clan. But if the Duanmu clan found out, they would not let go of this good opportunity. The other people in Xinghai Pavilion did not want to provoke an opponent, but the Duanmu clan already had an enemy. If they did not attack Gu Nan while he was seriously injured, were they going to wait for him to recover before attacking? Chapter 208. The Duanmu family was a very special existence on Cheong Flower Planet. The characteristics of God Path cultivators determined that the Duanmu family could not completely hide themselves. They had to be exposed to people, especially to ordinary people. This was because the source of their power came from their faith. Although they were not like God, where their faith was so obvious that they had to be worshipped, they could not hide from the world. So, it was easy to find their territory. There was an entire city on Cheong Flower Planet that belonged to their sphere of influence. This is Three-Leaf Mountain City. The Duanmu family is the real controller here. Ren Qixuan looked a bit careful. But they have done a good job on the surface. Not many people know about this. Gu Nan nodded. If faith did not need to be highly obvious, people could not even know who they were worshipping and gather faith power. For example, if a person who believed in Buddhism prayed to Buddha one day and had his wish fulfilled the next day, as long as he was sincere, then faith power would be generated. And if a God path cultivator did something, they could guide faith power to gather here, even if the person who believed in Buddhism did not know of their existence. The Duanmu family's high level lives in front. Do you know where their ancestral grave is? Ah? Ancestral grave. This. Forget it. You can go back. Gu Nan waved his hand and said casually. A place like the ancestral grave was not likely to be known by outsiders. Ren Qixuan looked like he was relieved. He quickly bowed and said, "Yes, I will leave now." At first, he was a bit unconvinced and thought that Gu Nan had defeated him with a sneak attack. But when Gu Nan knew where the Duanmu family was and brought him there, he no longer had such thoughts. This person had torn open space to bring him here. Ren Qixuan could not understand that his rare trip to a nightclub would provoke a world breaker. Fortunately, the other did not seem to want to make things difficult for him. He just wanted him to lead the way. In fact, Ren Qixuan should be glad. If Gu Nan's goal was to sneak in, then he, as a guide, would have been killed. Fortunately, it was not. The Duanmu family looked no different from an ordinary rich family. The villas near the sea reflected the same lights and voices at night as they did in the day. Boom! The huge sword, which was over 200 meters long, slashed down from the sky. Instantly, dozens of buildings were slashed in half, and countless Duanmu family disciples were killed or injured. Enemy attack! Enemy attack! Inform the Patriarch immediately. The Duanmu family reacted very quickly. Almost at the same time, someone shouted. His voice was transmitted through technological equipment and special arrays. The internal system of a truly powerful organization would definitely be a combination of technology and metaphysics to prevent the enemy from counterattacking from one aspect. But the sound soon stopped because when they raised their heads again, they could no longer see Gu Nan. Gu Nan had always liked to use the most direct and efficient method to do things, and it was the same for him to search for the Duanmu clan's ancestral tomb. Duanmu Sun and his daughter definitely knew where the ancestral tomb was. However, it was meaningless because it was impossible to capture and interrogate a deity path cultivator. Currently, Gu Nan's understanding of the All Heavens realms could be considered to be more experienced. He was very clear about the characteristics of each sect. Divine Tao cultivators were famous for having many clones, making them even more difficult to kill. If you planned to subdue a deity path cultivator and interrogate them for information, sorry, they might just kill themselves and have a new body. Breaking world deity path cultivators could not be interrogated, but that did not mean the rest of the Duanmu family could not. That was one of the methods Gu Nan thought of. If the other method did not work, that would be his last resort. It was rare that no shadow body jumped out. Gu Nan turned into a shadow and snuck into the Duanmu family. Then, countless shadows snuck out. After Gu Nan's sword, the entire Duanmu family was in chaos. Especially after he disappeared, the chaos became even more obvious. No one would believe the enemy just dropped a sword and left. It was obvious he was hiding in the dark. In that chaos, many shadow bodies snuck in. They found the Duanmu people and asked the same question. Where is the ancestral tomb? The shadow body's voice was very hoarse. Because it was Gu Nan's simulated vocal cords, it could not be compared to the original. Anyone who could not answer the question was killed without hesitation. It increased the fear of the Duanmu family. In sufficient panic, People would always be more easily manipulated by the outside world. Even the moonlight today was very cooperative and gloomy. Who are you? Do you know this place is? Don't kill me. I really don't know. Really? Young man, do you have a grudge against the Duanmu family? Why don't you? Gu Nan's expression remained the same from the beginning to the end, even though the words were messy and the killing was endless. He followed the people of the Duanmu family and found 2 people he knew. Big lady, there is an enemy. Before a servant could finish speaking, he was cut in half by a shadow. It's you. A shout came from ahead. It was Duanmu Nianlan. She was the only break-world person in the Duanmu family. The expression on her face was more vivid than the one Gu Nan had seen before. If he had to describe it, this was a real person. The one before was a puppet. It was the kind that could be controlled from thousands of miles away. However, Gu Nan only revealed a strange smile, and his figure disappeared instantly. Flash attack. When Duanmu Nianlan turned around, Gu Nan's sword had already landed. It slashed her shoulder. The sword attack was dozens of times stronger. It almost cut her body open. How? Feeling the damage, Duanmu Nianlan could not believe it. She did not have time to use her God Path Golden Body, but how could this person's sword path be so strong? This time, Gu Nan's method was completely different from the last time they met. He was a body cultivator. How could he know space laws and sword path? With Duanmu Nianlan's level, she could tell teleportation and pure speed. That was why she was so shocked. Actually, what skills Gu Nan used to fight monsters were analyzed based on the situation. Facing an unknown enemy, he always used break-world powers. He could attack the widest range, but God Path cultivators did not fall for that. On the other hand, his recovery power was suppressed, so he could not forcefully change blood. It was better to use a sword. Duanmu Nianlan was in pain. She screamed into the sky. Gold light appeared around her. Her God Path golden body appeared behind her. Meanwhile, Gu Nan's movements were even faster. He consecutively attacked several times, and each strike landed precisely on the previous wounds. Each time, it was a heavy blow, causing the golden light around Duanmu Nianlan to waver. In just a short moment, Duanmu Nianlan's shoulder was torn open and golden blood slowly flowed out. Chapter 209. The moment Gu Nan stopped moving, a presence came from behind him. It was Duanmu. Senator Duanmu Sen's real body looked serious, but his eyes looked more serious. They looked more lively. On the other hand, Gu Nan seemed to have expected this since the moment Duanmu Sen appeared. His figure had already vanished once more and teleported behind Duanmu Sen instead. Duanmu Sen moved faster. He turned around and threw a punch. Although he was in a hurry, it was not like he did not see the fight. Unfortunately, his punch still hit nothing because Gu Nan had no intention of making a move at all. Gu Nan merely used him as a springboard and immediately flashed out of the door. He ran away? Duanmu Sen frowned. Gu Nan jumped up and down and disappeared from his sight. He did not understand. His opponent had come to kill so many people, but he did not do anything substantial. He just killed a bunch of people and then ran away. As for the loss of his people, Duanmu Sen did not feel bad about it, but he did not care too much either. The lifespan of a break-world person was too long. They were just normal people. After a few decades they could raise a few more generations. Why should he care? Even Duanmu Yin and his daughter did not rush to take revenge even though they knew that she was killed by Gu Nan. Instead, they chose to take their time to think about it. Nianlan, are you okay? Duanmu Nianlan shook her head. The wound on her shoulder was not light, but it would not affect her ability to fight. She was more concerned about the changes in the enemy. Duanmu Nianlan was very competitive. Including this time, she had lost to Gu Nan twice. Between break-world people, there were no clear levels. It all depended on their skills and how they performed. Everyone had the possibility of beating someone else, but that Gu Nan had too many tricks up his sleeve. If the first time was about absolute power, using his body to fight his god path gold body, then the second time was about extreme skill. In such a high-speed fight, every sword hit the same spot. If he was not an elite who had been practicing the sword for many years, how could he do that? Father, do you think that person purposely lured us out? Duanmu Nianlan tossed aside her thoughts and immediately thought of this possibility. The enemy deliberately lured out the two break world people. It looked like they had some other goal. It's very possible. Duanmu Sen had thought of this as well. However, he suddenly said, "Be careful." As soon as Duanmu Sen shouted, she realized a barely visible shadow had risen behind her. The shadow quickly condensed into a saber and gave off a strange aura as it stabbed into Duanmu Nianlan's back. From the king? The blade of the divine soul. It was the same wound. Only now did Duanmu Nianlan understand why Gu Nan was so insistent on inflicting a wound on her body. The divine Dao golden body could defend against the divine Dao saber, and they both restrained each other. But what if there was a gap in the divine Dao golden body? Now Duanmu Nianlan knew the result. The divine soul blade pierced through without any obstruction, accurately hitting Duanmu Nianlan's divine soul, causing her to freeze on the spot, her pupils suddenly becoming slack. It was just one strike, and Duanmu Nianlan was injured like never before. The divine soul blade in Gu Nan's hands was even stronger than the divine Dao golden body. The divine soul blade in the hands of Gu Nan was stronger than the divine Dao golden body. When Gu Nan took over the Shadow Servant's ability, the effect was naturally more terrifying. Duanmu Nianlan felt her vision go black. Her body started to go soft. She felt like she was going to fall to the ground. But her mind was very clear. From the moment Gu Nan showed up, every move he made was clearly displayed in front of her eyes. He used a sneak attack to inflict a wound. He used that weird sword skill to enlarge the wound and divert her attention. His sword was very strong. If he could hit a weak spot, he might be able to severely injure her. Because of that, she did not protect her shoulder very well. Otherwise, she would not have been hit repeatedly. Instead of forcing him to attack her weak spot, it was better to let him attack her shoulder. But when she thought he was going to accumulate injuries, he suddenly left. She and her father thought he was trying to lure her away. However, before he could finish his thought, the final killing move appeared. Divine Soul Blade. The Divine Soul Blade had to hit the golden body's weak spot to deal the most damage. Unfortunately, her body had just been hit with a weak spot. These chaotic thoughts kept echoing in Duanmu Nianlan's head. She felt her eyelids grow heavier. Facing a near-death injury, even a world breaker could not do anything. In the outside world, Duanmu Nianlan's golden body of the divine Dao was quickly fading away, revealing her original form, a young girl dressed in ordinary clothes. With a sweep of her figure, the young girl's body landed in Gu Nan's hands. "Well, now we can have a good talk." Gu Nan smiled at Duanmu. Senator Duanmu Sun looked at him with a dark face. "Where is your family's grave?" Near planet Huaqiong, there were many secret fleets gathering in space. They surrounded the place. "We have arrived at planet Huaqiong. Is the starship ready?" Gold Clothes stood in a starship. She looked emotionless as she asked the man in front of her. She was a world breaker. She had the power to stand in space, but the man in front of her could not. He was the captain of the starship. He was only in the nuance level. "Mister, all the starship paths have been locked down," the captain politely replied. "As long as it is a starship, it will not be able to leave this region safely. Starship paths were limited in space. You could not just pick a random place. That gave others the possibility of locking them down." But the captain was careful. He said, "As long as it is a starship." What he meant was, if the other party was a world breaker, then their lockdown would be a joke. World breakers could travel between planes. What was the point of locking down the region? Gold Clothes understood what he meant. She impatiently waved her hand. She was a world breaker elite. How could she not know this? She was certain the other party was heavily injured. He could not withstand the pressure of tearing space. If he wanted to leave, he had to go through the starship. That was why she was doing this. It was just like when Gu Nan locked down the heavily injured Luo Fei. Every dog had its day. Now it was his turn. You guys just wait here. If any starship dares to leave, stop them all, Gold Clothes said in an overbearing tone. Countless starship went in and out of planet Huaqiong every day. Because of her words, they were all going to stop. That was the power of Shanghai Pavilion. Let's go. Zihe was already waiting. When the starship's lockdown circle was set up, the two of them left immediately. They headed for planet Huaqiong. The two of them had lived in the central system for hundreds of years. They did not need to lead the way like Gu Nan. They headed straight for the Duanmu family. It was a shame what they saw was a ruin. Chapter 210. What exactly are you looking for? Duanmu Sen's face looked gloomy. He could not suppress the anger in his voice. If his daughter was not in the man's hands, he would have punched him. Break world elites rarely cared about family, but this daughter was different. Anyone who raised a break world-class child would treat her like a treasure. Shadow Song. Do you know this name? It should be something, Gu Nan said. He looked at the Duanmu father and daughter with interest. One was next to him, and the other was on his shoulder. The two of them looked like normal people. Perhaps the ones who went out on missions were just their clones. No. Duanmu Sen suppressed his anger. I can take you to search the ancestral grave, but can you let me see my daughter first? He did not forget that Duanmu Nianlan had been injured by Gu Nan's God Soul knife. He did not know if she was alive or dead. She could die at any moment. Gu Nan shook his head. If you want your daughter to be safe, find what I am looking for. Gu Nan was not stupid enough to give up his bargaining chip. He did not even want to let Duanmu Nianlan leave him. Rule powers were not safe enough. They could be cut off by someone else. Only an evil god body could make Gu Nan feel safe. He could ensure he could kill Duanmu Nianlan at any time. Duanmu Sen's forehead was full of blue veins. He angrily said, I do not know what Shadow Song is. If you are looking for something, just take it. What ancestral grave? The Duanmu family had not buried anyone in there for a few hundred years. They did not even have someone to clean it. It was just a decoration. What era was this? Burial had long since ceased to be popular. Divine Tao cultivator clans even more so had their own burial method. Even if the Shadow Song he was talking about was a treasure, so what? Could it compare to the daughter of a break world elite? Duanmu Sen was telling the truth. He wanted Gu Nan to find what he wanted and leave. Gu Nan said, Oh. He kept searching. It was not like he wanted to waste time. It was just his habit to be careful. As a professional gamer, he was bound to be meticulous when doing quests. But unfortunately, even after Gu Nan carried Duanmu Nianlan around, he still didn't find any clues. There was nothing that resembled Shadow Song. Even though Gu Nan held one item after another in his hand, the evil god's temple didn't give him a notification. This meant that they weren't Shadow Song. What could it be? Right. Gu Nan suddenly remembered that he seemed to have forgotten a very useful person. Shadow power flashed in front of him, and a figure quickly took shape. It was a young and beautiful girl, but as a shadow servant, her skin was a little dark. It's really you. Duanmu Sen's eyes burned with anger. This was his other daughter, Duanmu Yin. Even though he had some expectations, he still couldn't take it well when he personally witnessed his daughter being killed and even refined into a puppet. Luckily, it wasn't the most important one. Duanmu Sen could only comfort himself. As long as there was hope of saving Duanmu Nianlan, he wouldn't turn against her so easily. This is the Duanmu family's ancestral tomb. Do you have any memories of Shadow Song? Gu Nan asked. Duanmu Yin had been refined into a shadow servant by him. She retained a portion of her memories from when she was alive, and many of these memories came from Purple Will. Purple Will had used a wisp of her soul to possess Duanmu Yin in order to lure him to the Duanmu family's ancestral tomb. Did she know anything about Shadow Song? I don't know anything about Shadow Song. Duanmu Yin shook her head decisively. This meant that she had no recollection of this word. But then she said, "But I think I know how to get to this place." The Duanmu family's ancestral tomb was indeed in a sorry state. Gu Nan's first attack was fine, but when he fought with Duanmu Nianlan, they both used the power of laws. Just the shock waves were enough to destroy everything around them. Zihe and Jin Yi both had ugly expressions on their faces. The Duanmu family's ruins were like a huge slap to their faces. Actually, it wasn't just the problem of them being late. The Duanmu family's current state indicated another possibility. His injuries might not be that serious, and he might still have enough battle strength. Otherwise, how could he have attacked the Duanmu family? How could the Duanmu family's two divine path cultivators just sit back and watch as their family's base was destroyed? It might not be Gu Nan. Jin Yi was silent for a long time. Finally, she found a reason and said, "Perhaps the Duanmu family just happened to meet an enemy." Even she herself didn't believe this reason. However, Zihe agreed. "That's right. Let's search first." The reason wasn't important. What was important was that they had already come here. If they were scared away without even seeing the enemy, how could they still have the face to do that? They had used such a large force to surround Jade Flower Planet. It was impossible that the pavilion didn't know about it. Tacitly acknowledging the two's mischief was actually a form of compensation. If they went back with their tails between their legs, then they could forget about revenge in the future. Gentlemen, may I ask if this is the Duanmu family?" A voice came from behind them, causing them to turn around in surprise. It was a very ordinary-looking girl. Regardless of her cultivation level or anything else, there wasn't the slightest bit of abnormality. However, the fact that she had asked such a question here was already very strange. "Who are you? Why are you looking for the Duanmu family?" Jin Yi and his companion looked at each other and asked coldly. "My name is Zhou Jingwen." Zhou Jingwen felt like a huge rock was pressing down on her heart when Jin Yi stared at her. Even breathing was difficult. Her rationality told her that she could not reveal the existence of a senior. However, that indescribable pressure made her speak the truth uncontrollably. "It's a senior. What kind of senior?" Jin Yi interrupted her before she could finish. "A senior with only half a head." Just as Zhou Jingwen arrived outside the Duanmu family and coincidentally bumped into Jin Yi and his companion, Gu Nan brought the father and daughter of the Duanmu family to a strange place. Shadow servant Duanmu Yin did not bring Gu Nan to any place in the ancestral tomb. Instead, they went to the entrance. More accurately, they went to the ground at the entrance. Boom! As Gu Nan smashed his fist down, a huge hole instantly appeared in the ground. It was indeed hollow. Dim moonlight shone into the hole. Gu Nan sent Duanmu Yin in to scout. Soon, they confirmed that there was no danger inside. However, there was a 12 or 13-year-old girl. When Gu Nan saw this girl, his pupils involuntarily constricted. He had seen this face before. "Who are you?" The girl's beautiful eyes were wide open. Her common language was a little shaky, as if she had not spoken for a long time. "What's your name?" Gu Nan did not answer her question. Chapter 2:11. My name is Shadow Song. As soon as he said this, Gu Nan subconsciously checked his evil god's temple, but there was still no notification of completion. Why was this happening? This question only lingered for a moment. As a professional player, Gu Nan quickly found two possibilities. Either the girl in front of him was lying, or she was indeed called Shadow Song, but not the Shadow Song he was looking for. He turned his gaze back to the girl, Shadow Song. From the first moment Gu Nan saw her face, he knew that she was definitely a very important person. Her face was almost identical to a person's. No, more accurately, it was half a person. That was the left side of Zhuozhua's face. This girl who called herself Shadow Song was like Zhuozhua, who had taken the left side of his face and made a complete person out of it. Why would Purple Will bring him here to find someone who was clearly related to Zhuozhua? And what was the purpose of that woman called Red? These two thoughts flashed through Gu Nan's mind for a moment, then he tossed them aside. He had no interest in the NPC's schemes. He only cared about his own quest. It's still up ahead. Duanmu Yin's voice sounded in Gu Nan's ear, causing him to tremble. He raised his head and saw that there was a silver coffin behind the little girl. Gu Nan couldn't be bothered to think too much about it, but that didn't mean he couldn't see through some things. This Shadow Song wasn't what Purple Will was looking for. She was looking for this coffin. As for Shadow Song, was it that woman called Red? Gu Nan began to realize that he was involved in two quests at the same time, one from Purple Will and the other from Red. The two quests had different objectives, but they had a common point: the Duanmu family's ancestral tomb. Gu Nan didn't think any further. He carried Duanmu Nianlan and walked quickly to the silver coffin. He lifted the coffin lid with a wave of his hand. There was a corpse lying inside. Naturally, the coffin was for a corpse. It was an indescribably handsome man. He looked to be in his mid-30s, the perfect age for women of all ages. It was unknown how many years he had been buried here, but not only did his appearance remain the same, even his skin showed no signs of decay. However, this handsome uncle's image was ruined by one thing: there was a crescent-shaped dagger stabbed into his heart. Gu Nan had been doing quests for so many years, it was impossible for him to not have the ability to think. It was clear that the machete was what he was looking for. He raised his hand and was about to pull out his scimitar when two exclamations came from behind him. "No. Please don't." The first voice belonged to Duanmu Sin, and the second voice belonged to Duanmu Yin. Gu Nan's hand stopped at the moment he grasped the scimitar. He did not immediately pull it out. He turned around and asked, "Why?" The two of them seemed to heave a sigh of relief at the same time. Duanmu Yin quickly said, "In my memory, if I pull out that scimitar, something bad will happen." A shadow servant's memories were constant. They would not recall more, nor would they forget. Duanmu Yin could not remember the purpose of the purple intent, but she remembered that she could not pull out the curved blade. Duanmu Sun was still a human, so his memories were unstable. After all, this was the Duanmu family's ancestral tomb. Seeing this scene, he finally remembered some things. You must not pull it out. Once it's suppressed, the blood ancestor will revive immediately. Duanmu Sun said solemnly. Blood ancestor? Gu Nan looked at the handsome uncle, then turned his attention back to the evil god's temple. There was still no notification. He was almost certain that the scimitar in front of him was Shadow Song. There were two ancient characters on the blade, and he could still vaguely make out them. However, the evil god's temple still did not declare that he had completed the quest. There was only one possibility. In the game, the completion of a quest could not be described in word. For example, the quest Find XX was also described in words. One quest only required the player to see the target, while the other required the player to collect it. Clearly, the criteria for this quest were more stringent. Even if Gu Nan had the target in his hands, the quest could not be considered completed. Seeing that Gu Nan was silent and hesitant, Duanmu Yin, who was a shadow servant, did not feel much. However, Duanmu Sun became anxious. The blood ancestor is a great demon from 10,000 years ago. Legend has it that he is as immortal as the stars. He must be a Star Lord if, before he could finish speaking, Gu Nan had already pulled out the scimitar. Duanmu family head's face turned pale. Gu Nan could not help but shake his head. On one side was a super demon that would cause chaos in the world, and on the other was his quest. What did chaos have to do with him, Gu Nan? With the machete in Gu Nan's hand, the evil god's temple was finally shaken as he had expected. Quest completed. Find Shadow Song. Total sin points, 300. Seeing this short sentence, Gu Nan's eyes almost popped out of their socket. 300 sin points. Even if he was already at the 4th level, even if the quest's reward was related to the difficulty, even if, no matter what, this was still too much. No matter what, find Shadow Song was not a difficult quest. Even without Red's notification, Gu Nan would have found out sooner or later that the Duanmu family was involved. Cheong Flower Planet was only so big, and the incident was triggered here. The Duanmu family's strength was not much. If it was not for the fact that Gu Nan wanted to save time and effort, he had better methods. Whether it was sneaking in silently or killing the Duanmu father and daughter first, it was not too difficult. So what was the meaning of such an excessive reward? The evil god's temple could not be wrong. Gu Nan was very clear about this. Therefore, according to his experience, this kind of abnormal reward often meant a possibility. This was an advance reward with some additional difficulty after the quest was completed. The uncle in the coffin began to move. First, his fingers, then his arms, and finally his entire body. He slowly sat up, opened his eyes, and calmly scanned his surroundings. Blood ancestor. Duanmu Sin couldn't help but call out. He was already accumulating energy, his divine Tao golden body condensing behind him, ready to attack at any moment. Gu Nan was in no hurry to attack. Instead, he asked, "You are?" "I'm Violet Lightning." The handsome uncle flashed a friendly smile at Gu Nan. "Did you save me, little brother?" "Thank you very much." Duanmu Sin was startled. This person's serious expression did not seem to be faking it. Gu Nan nodded, then turned to look at the little girl, Shadow Song, and said expressionlessly, "Then you are." "Thank you very much as well." A charming smile appeared on Shadow Song's face. At some point in time, she had changed her clothes. She was wearing a blood-red cloak with a cape on her back. Even her hair was blood-red. Chapter 212. The ground at the entrance of the ancestral tomb suddenly fell silent. Duanmu Sen's originally tense nerves seemed to suddenly freeze. He looked at the uncle who called himself Violet Lightning, then at the little girl, Shadow Song. He should call her the blood ancestor, Shadow Song. "Then you can go," Gu Nan said as he handed Duanmu Nianlan to him. Duanmu Sun took his daughter in a daze. His gaze wandered back and forth several times before finally stopping on Shadow Song. The blood ancestor, bang! Gu Nan viciously punched him in the temple, sending him and his daughter flying out of the cave entrance. "You talk too much." Gu Nan glanced at the cave entrance and curled his lips. If it weren't for the fact that divine cultivators were too tough, he would have already hacked the father and daughter to death. But there was no benefit in killing them now, so Gu Nan couldn't be bothered to do it. "What a violent man," Shadow Song muttered. It was none other than the crimson-robed Shadow Song. After Gu Nan dealt with Duanmu Sen, his gaze also shifted to Shadow Song, his cold gaze faintly revealing a hint of danger. "What? You want to fight me?" Shadow Song raised her head. "It seems that you still don't believe me? Then why don't we try?" Before she could finish speaking, a shadow suddenly appeared in front of her. Judging from its posture and speed, it didn't seem to have any intention of showing mercy. Shadow Song didn't seem to be able to react at all. Her entire body swayed and she almost fell over. But the shadow didn't hit her. A figure had already appeared in front of her. With a wave of his hand, he broke through Gu Nan's law of shadows. It was the handsome uncle, Violet Lightning. With just this one attack, the situation on the battlefield became much clearer. Shadow Song was just bluffing. At the very least, she didn't have the strength to match the name Blood Ancestor, but Violet Lightning did. Not only could he easily block Gu Nan's attack, but he also clearly had a close relationship with Shadow Song. "Are you all right?" Violet Lightning leisurely turned around and looked at Shadow Song behind him. His movements were too calm, without the slightest hint of nervousness. It didn't look like he was worried, but more like a lover flirting, or in short, a public display of affection. Shadow Song pursed his lips and shook his head. He didn't look too happy. He's so rude. Can you kill him? I'm afraid that won't work. He's very powerful. Uncle Purple Bolt similarly shook his head. Then should we hurry up and run? Shadow Song hesitated for a moment before replying. It's too late. There was a helpless look on Purple Bolt's face. His target is you. Gu Nan gripped his curved blade, Shadow Song. His gaze never left Shadow Song's body. This was enough for Violet Lightning to understand. The two of them talked as if there was no one else around, but Gu Nan did not interrupt them. The reason was simple. Professional players had to be able to clearly distinguish which dialogue could be skipped and which could be related to quest clues. Even Gu Nan was curious about the identity and relationship of these two fellows. Someone asked me to protect the owner of this blade, Gu Nan said as he tossed the curved blade in his hand. Gu Nan's quest was already over, but according to the usual pattern of criminal incidents, he could still obtain some resources from the vicinity of the incident. And the one that would most likely benefit him was undoubtedly the reward that Red had mentioned. This little girl named Shadow Song could bring him to the Starry Sky Path. The dungeon system that Gu Nan hadn't opened in a long time would most likely fall into her hands. On the other hand, the exorbitant reward from the criminal incident could very well mean that there was a hidden danger. He needed enough information to resolve it. Violet Lightning was slightly taken aback. A trace of seriousness appeared in his eyes. It seemed that the person Gu Nan had mentioned made him extremely wary. Meanwhile, Shadow Song suddenly became lively, completely different from her previous obedient appearance. So you're here to be my bodyguard? A moment later, she saw Gu Nan's figure suddenly disappear. This time, not even Violet Lightning could stop him. He was simply too fast. The super high priority of Lightning Strike made all restrictions on the level of laws useless. Teleportation was true teleportation. Gu Nan appeared behind the girl. He placed his hand on the back of Shadow Song's head, and then there was a series of pleas. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Please let me go. It's all my fault. Shadow Song didn't even gasp for breath. Then, she turned around and looked at Gu Nan with tears in her eyes. Gu Nan ignored her expression. He gently grabbed her and pulled her in front of him. You can enter the Starry Sky Path? Gu Nan's voice was calm, but his meaning was clear. For world breakers, the Starry Sky Path was no longer a mysterious term. If they were lucky enough to become a Star Lord, they could enter. What was the Starry Sky Path? It could be understood that there were countless planes and astral worlds in the world. There was a place that was like a center or a core. Only divine souls could enter this place, and only Star Lords who had completely constructed their own laws could enter. The Starry Sky Path had dots of light that corresponded to each plane. These dots represented a world. If they could control the origins of these worlds, the Star Lords could truly control the world and become the true master of the astral world. This was why the Starry Sky Path was called the Center. In other words, the Starry Sky Path was the Star Lord's hunting ground. It was used to capture planes. Gu Nan didn't know how the Star Lords obtained the origins. But from the few times he had experienced the Starry Sky Path, he could tell that it was related to the mission mode. Before, Chiowenran, Zwazwa, and Purple Will didn't show any doubts about the mission. That meant it was normal. Yes. Shadow Song pursed her lips and didn't say anything. This time, it was Purple Lightning who answered for her. She wants to recover her power. She needs the world origin. Oh, can you take me there? Gu Nan wasn't sure what he needed, so he could only ask ambiguously. What will happen if we refuse? I'll beat you to death. Purple Lightning shrugged helplessly. It looks like there's no way to refuse. Then, before we become teammates, can you let us test your power? This uncle was very polite, even in a situation like this. Yes. Gu Nan nodded. He was about to test, it out with purple lightning when the 300 sin points appeared in his mind. So the words that came out of his mouth changed. "Let's see who can kill faster," Gu Nan said as he pointed outside the cave. Chapter 213. Under the night sky of the Duanmu family's ruins, Gold Clothes and He finally arrived. They were carrying Zhou Jingwen. They were in front of the big hole in the ancestral grave. It was not because they were good at searching, it was just that it was too obvious. Not only was the hole so deep that they could not see the bottom, but there was also the shadow rule movement. For these two world breakers it was like a light in the dark. "This is it." Gold Clothes looked down with a serious face. They guessed Gu Nan might still be able to fight. They were much more careful than before. They were even prepared to run if something went wrong. No matter how important their reputation was, it was not as important as their lives. "Look after her." Jin Yi pointed at Zhou Jingwen and said, "Gu Nan left a nomological imprint on her. She might be of use." They had discovered the little black sword Gu Nan had left for Zhou Jingwen. World breakers could not simply give a rule mark. Every world breaker could only give a limited number of marks. They did not think Gu Nan would use it. Zihe nodded to show he understood. Zhou Jingwen was being carried by Zihe. She looked wronged as she stood next to the two of them. Her tears were about to fall. She was just a normal student. She had worked so hard to find the Duanmu family and then come here. It had not been easy for her. But before she could find where the elder was, she had not received any benefits. She had been caught by these two people. Even with Zhou Jingwen's eyes, she could tell they were the elder's enemies. Little Zhou wanted to cry. If she knew this was going to happen, she would have sold out Gu Nan. It would have been better than this. The elder was being chased like this because these two people were stronger than him. Zhou Jingwen's mind was running wild, but before she could finish her thoughts, she found that the situation in front of her had changed. A purple light came out of the big hole. It went straight for Gold Clothes, who was next to her. At the same time, a shadow appeared behind Zihe. A heavy punch was silently coming for the back of his head. Zhou Jingwen, who was standing behind the two of them, saw everything. She felt that time seemed to slow down, and she suddenly had a lot more time to think. But in reality, she didn't have time to think about anything. This unequal battle from beginning to end ended in an instant. Zihe, who was targeted by the heavy punch, was no different from his comrade, Lan Po. His head exploded with a single punch. The golden-robed man was even stranger. The purple light tore through the void and flashed past Jin Yi's body. Then, she seemed to be frozen, and her entire body stopped moving. Under Zhou Jingwen's astonished gaze, Jin Yi's body slowly split open from the middle. He was split into two and fell to the ground. Hearing, touch, smell, everything in reality began to return to Zhou Jingwen's body. The strong smell of blood made her nauseous, and she heard a strange conversation. "One move. Me too. The power of breaking magic. Swordsman." Zhou Jingwen did not understand the meaning of the conversation, but it was enough to clearly express Gu Nan and Purple Lightning's intentions. The duel between the two sides was a draw, because both sides only used one move. Speed did not matter. What followed was a discussion of each other's abilities. The power of breaking magic was too rare, and Purple Lightning was not too sure. Gu Nan, on the other hand, was very sure of Purple Lightning's abilities. He was a swordsman, a pure swordsman who had nothing to do with laws. It could also be understood that all of his laws were sword laws, and they contained all the characteristics of a sword. Swiftness, sharpness, and so on. At this moment, Gu Nan finally understood what the warning of 300 sin points meant. If he were to fight Purple Bolt now, there was a real possibility that he might die. It was not because of how powerful Purple Lightning was, but because of his sword. His sword had already been in his coffin, sleeping with him for tens of thousands of years. There was a saying that swordsmen nurtured their swords. Purple Lightning had used his coffin to nurture his sword for tens of thousands of years. When he came out of seclusion, how earth-shattering would his sword be? Fortunately, Genie had taken the hit for him, and Purple Lightning seemed to be more than willing to have another teammate. Perhaps there was also the red factor. It's just that there's a bit too much damage. Gunan looked behind Genie. There was a sword scar over 1,000 meters long, and even the ground had been cut half a meter deep. With this kind of sword force, even if 10 Genie stood together, they would still be cut down. When do we leave? Gunan asked directly, not thinking any further. This was all he cared about. In 3 days. Purple Lightning stood beside Gunan, slowly sheathing his sword. We have some matters to take care of. Purple Lightning and Genie had just woken up, so it was normal for them to have some trivial matters to take care of. Gunan nodded in understanding. Then we'll meet again in 3 days. Take this as collateral. He waved the curved blade in his hand, and without waiting for Purple Lightning's reply, he disappeared. Shadow Song was naturally very important. He wasn't afraid that they would go back on their word. Violet Lightning and Shadow Song were definitely hiding many more secrets. For example, what was the relationship between Purple Lightning and Purple Will? Why did Red want Gunan to protect Shadow Song? Why was Shadow Song stuck in Purple Lightning's heart? Why was Shadow Song so weak? Gunan wasn't interested in any of these tongue-twisting questions. Who had the time to care about the backstory of an NPC? Hey! Purple Lightning called out helplessly. Of course, he didn't get a response. Since you don't mind, I'll accept this girl. She's a good seedling. He turned to look at Zhou Jingwen, a smile appearing on his handsome face. Beautiful lady, are you interested in learning the sword? Gunan returned to the world of immortals and demons. This was his preparatory divine kingdom. He hadn't had the time to come back before. Now that he had 3 days of free time, he naturally had to come back and take a look. With the batch of shadow servants brought back from planet Xianhuang, the construction of the Divine Kingdom sped up significantly. These shadow servants from the Star Sea Pavilion were far beyond Yan Xiaoxiao's imagination, be it in terms of standard or the diversity of their abilities. She could not be more satisfied. In a year at most, the structure of the 2 alliances will be completely established. When Gunan asked about the progress, Yan Xiaoxiao said excitedly. Her excitement wasn't common, but it was a good thing for Gunan. This meant that Yan Xiaoxiao had found a new goal. It also meant that the construction of the Divine Kingdom wouldn't fail her. This strange girl seemed to have pursued power since she was young, not power itself, but something that came with power. She used to be addicted to killing people because she wanted to control the lives of others. When she took charge of Blue Dragon Hall for more than 20 years, this goal became even more clear. Not bad. Gunan nodded with satisfaction. Start the dual screening mechanism within the 2 alliances. The ranking system can also be implemented. Yan Xiaoxiao expressed her understanding and asked, do first-class people need any special symbols? Chapter 214. Players had come up with many ways to build a divine kingdom, all with the same goal, to cultivate strong people with the highest efficiency. From Gunan's understanding, there wasn't a single best plan, only the most suitable plan for the divine kingdom. In other words, the divine kingdom had to be designed according to the national conditions. For example, in a society where the feudal system had disappeared for a long time, there would be great resistance to implementing a hierarchical system. Of course, killing could be used to eliminate opponents, but this would cause too much damage to the population, which was obviously not a good choice. However, it was different in the immortal and demon world. This was a feudal era, and the concept of all men are equal had not been popularized, so it was much easier to classify humans. Do people have to be ranked according to their strength? Although she had understood Gunan's ranking system, Yan Xiaoxiao was still a little uncertain. Gunan nodded. Bloodline, talent, wealth, all of these can be converted into power, and we only look at the final result. Those who don't know how to cultivate can learn, those who don't know how to develop their bloodline can learn, and those who don't know how to spend money can learn. All information is free to the public, as long as they can learn it. Transcendents are first class, innate beings are second class, acquired beings are third class, and ordinary people are fourth class. Within each class, there are 3 ranks according to the proportion of people. Proportion of people? The first 10% are third class, the next 10% to 30% are second class, and the rest are first class. Then we need to do a census of the entire continent. Yan Xiaoxiao suddenly gasped. She knew how much work it would take. Ancient societies like the immortal and demon world rarely did census, especially during times of war. Coincidentally, Yan Xiaoxiao had done something similar in the Northwest, and the amount of manpower and resources that had been invested had shocked even Yan Xiaoxiao. And what Gu Nan said next made her eyes widen even more. That's right, not only do we need to do a census, we need to do it every day, and it has to be accurate to every single person, Gu Nan said calmly. Every city will be divided into districts, and each district will have no more than 500 people. A shadow servant will be in charge, and the number of people will be counted every day. Yan Xiaoxiao frowned and lowered her head to consider the feasibility of Gu Nan's words. Many problems could be avoided with the shadow servants who were never tired, unafraid of death, and absolutely loyal in charge of the statistics. The city-state system was the foundation of the population statistic. What they feared the most when doing statistics was people wandering around, and the city-state could minimize this situation. What if someone doesn't report? Or maybe some people really can't register? You are allowed to apply for leave, but you must report in advance. There is also a time limit. Gu Nan said lightly, special cases can be treated differently. Those who deliberately don't come will be sentenced to death. It was not an easy task to plan a completely new social system. Just like that, Gu Nan and Yan Xiaoxiao discussed and analyzed every possible loophole before coming up with a suitable solution. There had to be some omissions, but it didn't matter. Gu Nan had enough time and foundation to get used to it. If there was a problem, he would solve it. As long as he had enough power, no one could overthrow his rule. After discussing the entire hierarchy, Yan Xiaoxiao finally had some understanding of the world that Gu Nan had described, but she felt a chill in her heart. Teacher, I feel. She hesitated for a long time before saying, are you treating humans like animals to be reared in captivity? Whether it was counting the numbers or cultivating them in a specific direction, these were all methods that would only be used in artificial breeding. Gu Nan clapped his hands and said happily, it's great that you can understand. The appointed time with Violet Lightning was 3 days later in the astral realm. If it was the immortal devil world, it would be about a month later. During this period of time, Gu Nan had also taken some time to sort out his gains during this period of time. Ever since he had advanced to the 4th level, he had been trying to increase his strength non-stop. Fighting for the immortal devil world, heading to the Jade Flower planet. All these were for the sake of advancing to the 5th level as soon as possible, or even completing his first job transition. Gu Nan had never forgotten that there were still gods in this world. He had to at least complete his first job transition in order to have the ability to protect himself in front of them. Now that the immortal devil world was in his hands, Shanghai Pavilion's strength seemed to be stronger than he had imagined, so naturally, he had to focus on increasing his strength. Shanghai Pavilion did not have what he needed, so what was the point of fighting to the death there? Red said that Shadow Song could enter the Heaven Star Path, so she was Gu Nan's next target. After completing the Search for Shadow Song event, Gu Nan's Sin value had already reached 1350 points, and Lan Si's progress had slowed down again. His points were even more pitiful. He was only left with a mere 150 points, and the rest were all used to construct the Resurrection Law. If he had enough points, when Gu Nan had faced Yu Jiu, Duanmu Sun, and the others, He could have changed a few skills to deal with them. Unfortunately, he did not have the money. And with 1,500 points of sin value, he could construct the third law, which required a large number of points. The private instance dungeon is too unreliable. Up until now, there hasn't been another one in the White Fog. Thinking of the private instance dungeon, Gu Nan was furious. Back then, he had been excited for a long time, but he did not expect that it was completely a blind cat finding a dead mouse. After so long, there was still no second one. Today, Gu Nan was no longer the ignorant transmigrator of the past. His guesses about the nature of the instance dungeon were getting more and more, and they were getting closer and closer to the truth. Before Gu Nan came into contact with plane travel, he could directly receive quests from the evil god's temple. It was no different from a game. However, ever since he left the Langya world, such a quest had never appeared again. It all depended on Gu Nan's own reincarnation and search. After reaching level 4, the translated world quests seemed to have lost their effectiveness. At least, Gu Nan did not receive any external quest import notifications. The evil god's temple was just an inanimate object. Gu Nan had every reason to believe that he had triggered some sort of mechanism that had caused such a change. The 36 heavens and 72 boundaries might be fundamentally different from other small worlds. After reaching level 4, the essence of life is sublimated. It's also fundamentally different from before. Gu Nan easily found the key turning point. Next, it's time to explore the heavenly star path. Gu Nan had a strong premonition that perhaps he could find the answers to these questions one by one in the heavenly star path. He did not make Gu Nan wait for too long. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. When Gu Nan returned to Jade Flower Planet, Violet Lightning and Shadow Song were already waiting for him. What surprised him even more was that there were not just 2 people waiting for him. There was a third person. This is also our teammate. The handsome uncle was still very polite. I heard that you already know each other, Miss Wu-Gue? Chapter 215. As the reincarnated Buddha, Wu-Gue didn't have much enmity with Gu Nan, but their relationship wasn't that good either. She was originally the reincarnation of an ancient powerhouse who wanted to reincarnate and become a Buddha. However, she was interrupted by the heavenly secret path master and forcibly awakened in the 9,000th life. This caused her to be unable to obtain the Buddha's true body from her previous life. She even changed from male to female. Everything was fixed in this life. Of course, for people at this level, gender didn't matter. Later on, she wanted to borrow Zhua's teachings to merge her Buddha and demon, but Gu Nan intercepted her. This was the start of the conflict between the two. What are you looking at? Do you want to fight? Facing Wu Gui's gaze, Gu Nan stared back without hesitation. In any case, curved blade Shadow Song was still in his hands. He wasn't afraid of falling out with her. However, to his surprise, the young girl, No Return, calmly withdrew her gaze. Since that person appointed you to protect the current blood ancestor, you naturally have your value. Wu Gui's words caused Gu Nan to raise his eyebrows. From her expression, she clearly knew about Red's existence as well as its identity. Let's go, Purple Lightning said. The more valuable planes in the All-Heavens star path require at least 4 people. His last sentence seemed to be an explanation to Gu Nan as to why he had to bring Wu Gui along. Gu Nan couldn't help but laugh when he heard that. This was clearly a multiplayer dungeon setting in the game. Apart from player-made maps, the official maps mostly required 4 people or more. 4 people was the minimum requirement to complete a mission. For example, Gu Nan's private dungeon, Splendid World, required 4 people to enter. Shadow Song nodded lightly and took a step forward. With a serious expression, she said, "Stand beside me. Later, don't resist the light beam." Gu Nan and the others stood still. Shadow Song closed her eyes slightly and an indescribable light shone from her body, gradually enveloping everyone. Gu Nan felt a light coming from an endless distance, and his body involuntarily began to float. This was not an illusion. It was indeed his body that was moving, not just his soul. So the celestial star path isn't in this space? Gu Nan looked at the gradually opening spatial crack in front of him and said with a hint of understanding, "It's in the inner world. The person who discovered it called it the inner world, so we followed suit." Inner world. This was the first time Gu Nan had entered this place with his real body, but the scene was not much different from before: balls of light and spots of light. The light orbs represented the Devata realms, and the light spots, now that he thought about it, they were probably the Star-Lords. There were at least tens of thousands of light spots here. Thinking about it this way, it was really a very scary thing. Gu Nan and the others couldn't move. Shadow Song was carrying them forward. Soon, they were thrown into a ball of light and their vision returned. This was a strange plane. The entire world was pitifully small, almost the size of a city, and it was clearly divided into two sides. There was a camp on each side, and the two camps were connected by two black and white roads. "World of Heroes," Shadow Song said as soon as he entered this plane. "Number 652, it's ranked near the back. Looks like our luck is not bad," Violet Lightning said with a smile as he looked at the entrance of the camp. There was a number plate there. Young Lady No Return frowned. Clearly, this was also her first time here. She and Gu Nan were considered newcomers, so Violet Lightning said, "There are about 2,000 World of Heroes in total, and those ranked after 500 are considered less competitive. Haven't you been sealed for a long time? How do you know this?" Gu Nan looked at the two strangely. Young Lady No Return said, "Time is nothing to a Star-Lord. 10,000 years is just a snap of the fingers. If you want to improve, you'd better get used to this." She used to be one of the real big shots, so she didn't really care about Gu Nan's current strength. Gu Nan shrugged. "You can go snap your fingers, then come back and see if you can still stand in front of me." Gu Nan, who had only been in the world for a few years, had the right to say this. All right. Seeing that No Return was starting to glare, Violet Lightning had no choice but to mediate. The World of Heroes is a confrontational mission, so it's not easy. Don't fight amongst yourselves. As if to verify Violet Lightning's words, a blood curtain began to fall from the sky, just like what had happened to Gu Nan last time. Mission objective: destroy the enemy camp's crystal. It was just a simple sentence without any further hints. Meanwhile, the senior, Purple Lightning was still trying his best to explain to Gu Nan and Yi Lingchen. The World of Heroes is a rather special world. As you can see, the final objective is to destroy the enemy camp's crystal, but in the process, we have to try our best to kill the enemy's heroes. Wait a minute, heroes? Yes. Here we are called heroes, and the enemy will be 4 heroes from other places. This is where the name World of Heroes comes from. Gu Nan looked at him with a strange gaze, then looked at the two camps and the two paths. We are currently at the lowest level, so we can level up if the nearby enemies die, and we can get money if we kill enemies with our own hands, isn't that right? Gu Nan said quickly, as if he was the experienced one. How did you? This time, Violet Lightning was a bit stunned. Although there were many World of Heroes, not everyone had come here before. Even the young girl, No Return, hadn't come here before, so how did Gu Nan know? Was he the reincarnation of some almighty being? Gu Nan looked at him and knew that his guess was correct. What World of Heroes? It was simply a MOBA type of map. MOBA games were very popular. In his previous life, there were naturally many such maps, but due to various reasons, not many people played them. After all, to consider the balance of both sides was much more difficult than simply designing a mission map. What about the equipment? What about the skills? After confirming the map, Gu Nan began to ask hurriedly. To play a good MOBA match, the most important thing was to understand the skills of both sides, as well as the equipment that could be chosen. Looking at the two paths that didn't connect, It was obvious that there weren't many strategies to speak of. As long as it was a game, as a professional player, Gu Nan would never back down. Let alone competitive games, even if it was whack-a-mole, he was much better than the average person. Wait, what's going on? The young girl No Return finally couldn't take it anymore. She didn't want to participate in the battle in confusion and end up being the one to hold everyone back. Shadow Song put away the scimitar that Gu Nan had returned to her and said, "The World of Heroes starts with 2 days of preparation before the battle officially begins. That's enough time for you to familiarize yourself with this place. But before that, we're going to walk around and see if we can catch a few restless kids," Violet Lightning added. "What do you mean?" No Return was even more confused, but the two of them had already disappeared. Chapter 216. World of Heroes. Gu Nan walked in his own campsite, his gaze calmly sweeping across the surroundings, and he would occasionally ask the people in the campsite about something. That's right, there were natives on both sides of the World of Heroes camps, and their numbers were quite high. Just like the 2 roads that connected the camps on both sides were also divided into black and white sides, marked by a crystal high up in the middle of the camp. Compared to the games in Gu Nan's previous world, this World of Heroes was much more honest. If it was a crystal, then it was a crystal. At this moment, Gu Nan was standing in the middle of his own camp. In front of him was a huge white crystal, as tall as 20 people, embedded in the ground. "You mean, the 2 of them went out to look for enemies to attack?" Young Lady No Return stood beside Gu Nan, a thoughtful expression on her face. Along the way, she didn't really understand Gu Nan's actions at first. Since he knew that his companions had gone out to fight, what was the point of staying here? But as the conversation with the natives deepened, No Return quickly realized that something was wrong. This plane had a very special law, completely different from what she had seen in her previous world. First, they didn't fear death. They were called heroes, and after death, they only needed to wait for a period of time to revive in the Fountain of Heroes. Secondly, their goal was to destroy the enemy's crystal, and only to destroy the crystal. Any other actions like killing and stealing were to serve this purpose. Finally, if they wanted to increase their strength, there was only one way: to kill the enemy. The last hit requires money, otherwise, only experience. Do you understand? Gu Nan asked the NPCs one by one, and at the same time, said to No Return casually. Right, don't be in a hurry to learn skills. You can decide according to the type of enemy, Gu Nan said again. Girl No Return's face darkened a little. Don't tell me you've learned it already? What a pity. Under Gu Nan's nagging, Girl No Return's face didn't look too good, but she remained silent. She was a powerful person, so she still had this bit of willpower. There was a skill system in the World of Heroes. Every hero had 2 passive skills, 2 active skills, and 1 ultimate skill, for a total of 5 skills. According to Gu Nan's evaluation of his own skills, these skills did not appear randomly. Instead, they were based on the participant's own abilities. For example, the 5 skills that Gu Nan possessed were all abilities that he already possessed. The 2 passive skills were Shadow Power and Body of the Evil God. The 2 active skills were Flash Strike and Shadow Sword Overlay, and the ultimate skill was Justice Judgment. Among them, Shadow Power was a fixed passive skill, which meant that it could not be added by a hero. It could only be slowly leveled up along with the player's level. On the other hand, Body of the Evil God was similar to the 2 passive skills. It could be upgraded. This wasn't much different from the MOBA games in Gu Nan's memory, but there were some adjustments to the details to make it more suitable for the Star Masters. From Gu Nan's point of view, this was undoubtedly a balance mechanism of the world itself, to prevent the difference in strength between the Star Lords from affecting the strength of both sides. Even though realms could be limited in the inner world, there were still differences in the amount of power an individual could possess, so it was necessary to distribute them uniformly. Gu Nan did not ask what the skills of No Return were. This Buddha most likely still had some fear in his heart and would not tell him frankly. Besides, he didn't have time to care about this. He was busy asking the NPCs one by one. "Hello, may I ask what you have here that you can sell to me?" "I'm selling melons." "Can your melons recover HP?" "What are you talking about?" "Hey, don't eat it, you haven't paid yet." A moment later, Gu Nan casually threw away an auntie with a swollen face and took a bite of the melons and fruits on her stall, but he didn't find anything special. It wasn't just this auntie selling melons. Almost any native that Gu Nan could see, any stall, any shop, he had to go in and try them out. As a result, it was a mess. Of course, Gu Nan had no money, but as a hero, no one could do anything to him. Because there were too many complaints, a camp guard finally came in front of him and said awkwardly, "Hero, can you please, what do you want to do to me?" Gu Nan interrupted him rudely. "I don't dare." "Then what else do you want?" After nightfall. I heard that you visited all the shops in the camp today?" Purple Lightning looked at Gu Nan with a smile. He had already heard about Gu Nan's deeds. Gu Nan only nodded lightly and turned to say, "The two of you didn't get anything today either? It seems that the opponents aren't rookies." "How do you know?" Shadow Song said. "The rules of the world of heroes are special. If it's their first time here, it's impossible for them to stay in the camp. As long as someone comes out, they'll be ambushed by you." Gu Nan said. The girl No Return frowned and said, "What if the four of them act together? Then it means that they came prepared." Gu Nan curled his lips. "Even rookies will be told that they can resurrect here. If they aren't prepared, what's the point of staying together?" Some of the most basic rules were known by all the natives in the camp, and they could be found out by just asking around. Resurrection was the core rule, but the natives wouldn't say anything about the losses after death. No Return was speechless by Gu Nan. Fortunately, she was used to this kind of situation and didn't mind. She fell silent again. Shadow Song, who looked like a little girl, jumped in front of Gu Nan and waved her blood-colored cloak. "You haven't told me what you were doing during the day." Her big eyes were full of curiosity. She didn't hide her curiosity about this strange guy, Gu Nan. "Of course I'm looking for goods that can be used. Equipment, tools, and potions count." Gu Nan didn't hide his purpose and said casually. Shadow Song and Purple Lightning looked at each other and said doubtfully, "The items in the world of heroes belong to the mortal stage. What can they be used for?" In the world of heroes, heroes like Gu Nan had extraordinary power in the outside world even when they first entered the game. This was inevitable because their fixed passive ability was their own rule. Their realm was obviously at least extraordinary, and all the items in the camp didn't exceed the innate level and didn't contain any rule power. How could they help them? However, Gu Nan just shook his head. It might be useless in the later stages of the game, but it can set up a good start. Gu Nan's gaze swept across the three of them. His face was full of confidence. Chapter 217. Within the White Camp, in an ordinary hut, there was a constant roar. This was an ordinary household within the White Camp. The three siblings all had the surname Yang. The eldest was Yang Guang, the second was Yang Quan, and the third was Yang Lan. Today was supposed to be the day when the hero had arrived and the entire White Camp was celebrating. However, the Yang family was not happy at all. "This is too much. This is too much." A dignified young man shouted angrily, "Just because you are a hero, you think you can do whatever you want?" Beside the young man, there was a young lady with swollen eyes. She stared blankly in front of her. On the ground in front of her, there was a basket of fruits and vegetables. However, every single one of them had been chewed, torn, or bitten. None of them were intact. "Ah Guang, calm down." Another person stood beside the young man, Yang Guang, and was trying his best to persuade him. "His Excellency is here to help us defeat the evil Black Camp. Haven't you been looking forward to the arrival of His Excellency?" The young man who was persuading Yang Guang was more handsome. Unlike Yang Guang, he was more like a scholar. He was the second brother, Yang Quan. I am looking forward to it, but Quan. Guang did not know what to say. He could only hit the table angrily. Forget it. Yang Quan sighed. It's just some fruits and vegetables. If we can defeat the Black Camp, why would we care about these? Even the third sister Yang Lan spoke up. Yes, big brother, forget it. Perhaps His Excellency has such a strange hobby. Yang Guang kept a straight face and did not speak. Speaking of which, they were indeed just fruits and vegetables. Compared to the future of the country, they were not worth mentioning. However, to the Yang family, this basket of fruits and vegetables was their livelihood for half a month. Yang Guang and Yang Quan, one was a scholar while the other was a martial artist. They spent their days practicing martial arts and studying hard so that they could contribute to the upcoming war. However, it was also because of this that the family's livelihood depended on Yang Lan's fruits and vegetables. Now, Guang and I are going to the battlefield soon. There is food in the army. It's just that you have to suffer. Yang Quan smiled bitterly. The start. At this time, it was already 2 days after Gu Nan and the others had arrived. The battle between the two battalions had already begun, and soldiers were constantly pouring into the black and white battlefield. For Gu Nan, this meant that he had already sent out his troop. In that case, all we need to do now is to defend? Standing beside Gu Nan, Girl No Return frowned as she looked at the lines that kept pushing forward. Gu Nan nodded. In terms of tactical distribution, yes. Between the two camps, there were 2 paths, one black and one white. The layout of these 2 paths was completely symmetrical, but the difference in color had a hidden rule. By standing on a path that was the same color as the camp, he would receive a certain increase in attack power. According to Gu Nan's tests, the bonus was about 10%. For example, when Gu Nan and the others were in the white camp and stood on the white road, their attack power would be 10% higher than normal. Whether it was killing or pushing towers, they would be faster than on the black road. On the other hand, the heroes on the opposite side had the same bonus when they stood on the black road. Obviously, this was the offensive and defensive rule that the world provided for the players. Paths of the same color naturally had an offensive advantage, and in Gu Nan's 4-man team, they chose the most common 2-on-2 distribution. Gu Nan and Girl No Return would stand on the black road and be in charge of defense. The 2 veterans, Shadow Song and Purple Lightning, would go to the white road with the bonus attack power and attack the enemy. This distribution was very reasonable, and even Gu Nan approved of it. This was because at both ends of the road, there were camps and walls that would automatically attack the enemy. In the early stages of the game, it was very difficult for heroes to pose much of a threat to the walls. In other words, the defending side would definitely have the advantage in the early stages. This distribution was to allow the 2 rookies to quickly adapt to the rules of the world of heroes. As for Shadow Song and Purple Lightning, their task was to reduce the HP of the opposing wall as much as possible. If you don't know how to play, you can just leech experience. Leave the last hits to me, Gu Nan said to No Return. Even though there wasn't any equipment that could be bought here, it didn't mean that the last hits weren't important. Money couldn't be used to buy equipment, but it could be used to buy skill points. That's right, skill points here weren't given according to level. They had to be bought with their own money. Apart from the point that they had just arrived, if players wanted to level up their skills, they could only buy them from the Heavenly Law here. In the upper right corner of Gu Nan's vision, there was a small number. Ever since the game started, it had been slowly rising. This thing was called a hero coin, and the growth rate was about 1 coin every minute. Gu Nan looked at the number that hadn't changed for a long time and silently calculated in his heart. The troops of both sides quickly came into contact. Gu Nan and No Return rushed to the front lines. However, it was more difficult than Gu Nan had imagined to deal the finishing blow. Bang! Girl No Return fiercely struck out with her palm. It carried an astonishing Buddhist and demonic aura as it heavily hit an enemy cavalryman. This cavalryman was only at the innate realm. Even if he had a full set of armor, he should have been dead after taking a hit from a transcendent. However, after he fell from his horse, he spat out a mouthful of blood and got back up as if nothing had happened. Was that a skill? Gu Nan asked with a slight frown. Yes. Girl No Return's expression didn't look too good. She didn't think that she would encounter such a problem right after killing an enemy. This is probably what they call transcendent suppression. Gu Nan didn't think too much about it. In fact, Shadow Song and No Return had already mentioned it. In the hero's world, powers above transcendent wouldn't be affected when used on each other. However, when used on people or objects below transcendent, the effects would be greatly reduced. Gu Nan was also a little puzzled. He knew better than anyone else that this was clearly to prevent players from using their last hit. It was to prevent players from using too much power and directly clearing the line. To put it bluntly, this world used various rules to create a playstyle that was similar to a competitive game. Don't use skills to kill, and don't use skills to attack the minions. I think there's still a limit to your mana, Gu Nan said casually. Mana? Even though she was used to Gu Nan talking to himself, No Return still didn't understand what he was talking about. Gu Nan just shook his head and didn't intend to explain. She would naturally understand once she experienced it herself. At this moment, he pointed forward and said, "They're here." Their real opponents this time, the Star Lord that had arrived at the Black Camp, finally showed up. It was an old man and a young man. As soon as they showed up, the young man roared excitedly and rushed to the ground. His whole body turned into a ray of light and slammed into one of the White Camp soldiers, sending the latter flying. It was a soldier who had already been lightly injured. With this one move, he died instantly. At the same time that the soldier died, a red light shone from the young man's body. Should we make a move? No Return frowned. Even though the opponent was also being suppressed by transcendent suppression, he was clearly more familiar with the battlefield than them. No. Gu Nan shook his head decisively and pointed to the opposite side. We'll control the line. What do you mean? Chapter 218. Controlling the line was a skill. In almost all MOBA competitive games there was an emphasis on control of the line. However, the method and goal of controlling the line were different depending on the rules. Gu Nan was proficient in almost all types of games, and the current situation was no exception. He hovered in front of the line of minions, hovering in midair with the help of the law of shadows. He did not make a move and only watched. The old man and the young man could not tell what he was doing. They did not make a move and instead waited. Normally, the battle should be a battle between soldiers and heroes. That was why the young man had taken the time to kill one of the soldiers. That way, when one side was in a bad state and had to retreat or was killed, the other side could help the soldiers on their side and win the battle. You think so too? Gu Nan asked young girl No Return. He found it funny when he heard Purple Lightning and the young man talk about the strategy. No Return nodded and said, "There are celestial kingdoms in the Devata realms. This is how the celestial kingdom wars are fought." Gu Nan did not deny it. He only said, "The goal of war might be to win, but that's not what we're fighting now." Young girl No Return was slightly stunned. Before she could react, Gu Nan's figure had disappeared and appeared in front of a soldier below. The soldier was already heavily injured and was only one step away from death. Therefore, Gu Nan used very little force. With a light push, the soldier's head fell to the ground. In the next moment, two figures appeared beside him. They were the old man and the young man. Die! The young man was clearly faster. His body began to emit light again. This was clearly his skill. Movement speed increase, attack bonus, pseudocharge. Gu Nan's cold gaze swept across and instantly determined the characteristics of his opponent's light transformation skill. Then, he used his mind and instantly learned Flash Strike. His figure instantly disappeared in front of the two and appeared behind no return in front of the line of minions. The two were clearly stunned, but they quickly calmed down. They were not in a hurry to chase after Gu Nan. The older one was Star-Lord Mi Luo, and the younger one was Star-Lord Mi Tian. No one would have guessed that they were twin brothers. Mi was also a veteran player in the Heroes era. They knew very well that they couldn't cross the line of soldiers to chase. Otherwise, they would lose more than they gained. The two camps were filled with soldiers, and they were divided into different types of soldiers, but in the end, they could be divided into close-range and long-range type. Once they crossed the battle line, they would immediately attract the attacks of the enemy archers. Under transcendent suppression, these mortal soldiers could still injure them. Meanwhile, on the white camp's side, Gu Nan could not help but furrow his brows when he sensed the consumption of his troops. Just as he expected, the amount of energy consumed in a single flash attack far exceeded what he had consumed in the outside world. According to this ratio, he could only use flash strike 20 times in a row. But in actual combat, other skills also consumed energy, and the number of times they could be used would be even fewer. "Brother, what should we do?" Star-Lord Covering Heaven, who looked to be in his 20s, asked the old man beside him. The twins were 2 generations apart in appearance, but their communication wasn't affected at all. Star-Lord Covering Heaven said, "That person has learned displacement skills, so he won't be strong enough to attack. Let's attack the soldiers directly." Both of them had entered the Heroes era several times, so they were very clear about the skills they could learn. There were 2 active skills and 1 passive skill that they could add points to. It was a configuration of attack, defense, and agility, but it was adjusted according to each person's situation. If the opponent learned agility skills, he would definitely not be able to defeat the 2 of them in terms of attack, not to mention that they had the attack bonus of Black Warpath. This was equivalent to giving up a wave of soldiers. It was obvious that he was a newbie. The twins looked at each other and sighed in their hearts that they were lucky. Almost in the blink of an eye, the 2 of them began to push the line. Their attacks constantly landed on the white camp soldiers, making these mortals suffer. "Brothers! Hold on!" a small leader shouted in the formation. He should have added, "The heroes will soon do this and that," but he really couldn't bring himself to say it now. Gu Nan and the other girl stood quietly on the side, with no intention of making a move. "Are we still not going to make a move?" Young girl No Return looked at the calm Gu Nan, and could not help but ask. In reality, she did not understand Gu Nan's actions at all, but her rationality told her that he obviously knew more than she did, so he must have a reason for his actions. If it wasn't for this, how could she be someone who would listen to him obediently? "You can make a move, but remember not to attack the soldiers," Gu Nan said casually. "Attack when they're retreating so they won't be able to fight back." White Warpath. Shadow Song and Purple Lightning's current situation was almost a copy of Gu Nan and the other girls, except that they were the ones pushing the line, while the other 2 were being suppressed by them. "Their teamwork is average, probably a team put together at the last minute," Purple Lightning said as he finished off another enemy soldier with a swing of his sword. "Looks like those 2 are going that way." Shadow Song nodded silently. The 2 of them did not gain much from their previous probing, but it was not that they did not encounter anyone. They encountered a team with great teamwork, but they had only exchanged blows for a moment, so they could not come to any conclusions. However, they could use this opportunity to make a judgment. "I hope they won't be pushed too hard," Shadow Song said in a low voice. With a slash of the scimitar in his hand, a faint layer of blood mist seeped out. In the heavenly star path, her own strength was no longer important. Everything was shaped by the rules of the astral plane, and she still had her knowledge and experience. As she said this, the blood mist that Shadow Song released slammed into the opposite wall, making a sizzling sound. This was her offensive skill, and it had unimaginable destructive power against the wall. Black Warpath. Young girl No Return kept attacking the enemy champions, while Gu Nan spent most of his time watching the show, only taking time to finish off the dying enemies. Due to their strategy, it did not take long for the line of troops to be pushed in their direction. It was not easy for No Return to attack. There were too many enemies. This wave of troops was made up of black camp soldiers, and they surged towards Gu Nan like a tidal wave. After this wave of attacks, we might be able to whittle away 10% of the wall's energy. Star-Lord Mi Luo's wrinkles were almost squeezed together as he smiled. He had never seen such a cooperative opponent before. One only attacked the champions, and the other just watched the show. If this continued, it would not be long before the wall was breached. Once the wall was breached, they would have the ability to directly attack the white camp, which was equivalent to winning half the battle. On the other side, young girl No Return had already retreated to Gu Nan's side. At this moment, she could only sigh softly. Let's retreat first. We'll just defend the wall. Chapter 219. In terms of the understanding of minions and finishing blows, there were probably not many people in the entire All Heavens star path who could compare to Gu Nan. It wasn't that the Star Lords were stupid, but that they didn't understand this rule at all, and it was even more impossible for them to deliberately study how to play under this rule. Gu Nan naturally had his considerations when he asked No Return to attack the enemy heroes. He was considering the number and frequency of minions in the heroes' world. According to the duo's experience, there were only 6 waves of soldiers a day, and they were concentrated between noon and dusk, so the frequency wouldn't be low. So, under Gu Nan's deliberate control, by the time Ermi finished pushing the line, the second wave of minions from both sides had already set off and were almost there. Under No Return's astonished gaze, Gu Nan actually charged straight at the Black Camp army. This time, even the brothers Mi Luo and Mi Tian were stunned, almost thinking that this guy who had been slacking all this time had lost his mind and wanted to die. After all, they were still level 1, and facing a large group of mortal soldiers would probably kill them in the blink of an eye. Of course, Gu Nan didn't want to die. He stopped in front of the line of minions with great precision, ensuring that all the enemy troops could see him, but they still couldn't attack him. Next, he made an unimaginable move, activating Flash Strike. Gu Nan directly appeared behind the Black Camp army's commander. The Ermi on the other side sneered. I thought this guy came up with some good idea. A newbie is a newbie. Star-Lord of Heaven was the first to shake his head, not hiding the ridicule in his eyes. Since the other party could enter here, he was naturally a Star-Lord, but they didn't expect him to be so childish. Was he the only one who could think of a mere decapitation tactic? Once he tried it, he would find that the commander was far more difficult to kill than ordinary soldiers, and once he did, but all the soldiers would rebel, and it wouldn't be worth it. However, what the two didn't expect was that after Gu Nan arrived next to the Black Camp commander, he didn't have any intention of killing him, and instead lifted him up with one hand. The effect of extraordinary suppression was still present, so when heroes faced mortals, their attacks and defenses weren't as exaggerated, but their strength wasn't reduced. Even if Gu Nan didn't have the body of the evil god, it was still a piece of cake for him to lift a mortal. Therefore, under the dumbfounded gaze of the Black Camp soldiers, Gu Nan did not kill anyone. He took the commander away. This person, what is he trying to do? The two Star-Lords were equally confused. In their field of vision, Gu Nan was dragging the commander of the Black Camp in a circle, while the soldiers of the Black Camp kept following behind him. Star-Lord Mi Luo seemed to react. He is stalling for time. Isn't stalling for time helping us? Star-Lord Covering Heaven could not help laughing, not knowing what to say about this newcomer. One had to know that the second wave of soldiers was about to arrive. Once the two groups of soldiers converged, the offensive would only be more intense, and the consumption of the city wall would be even greater. Yang Guang donned his armor and held a long spear in his hand as he walked on the official road with his head held high. He was very excited. His life's biggest wish was right in front of him, just like how the tall city wall of the camp had appeared in front of him. Although the descending hero was a little unreliable, Yang Guang had temporarily forgotten this point due to the education he received since young. "Ah Guang, there's going to be a war." Yang Quan stood beside Yang Guang and said excitedly with the same expression. Yang Guang was almost speechless, and could only nod his head vigorously. "Ah Quan, Hey, look at what's that in front." Just as Yang Guang was about to speak, he saw that on the other side of the city wall, there was a large black shadow flying across the sky. Yang Quan looked over in shock and said after a while, "It looks like... Sir Hero? Quick! Inform the commander, we have to rush over immediately." The second wave of soldiers arrived slightly faster than Gu Nan expected, but this did not affect his actions. He led the Black Camp soldiers in a circle and finally threw the Black Camp's commander back. When the second wave of soldiers arrived, the frontline soldiers from both sides stopped just outside the attack range of the city wall. Perfect! After completing this series of actions, Gu Nan immediately praised himself shamelessly. The young girl, no return, cooperated and said, "What's the use of doing this? With the soldiers being controlled by me, the two opposite sides can no longer attack." Gu Nan sneered and said, "Follow me." On the other side, Mi Luo and Mi Tian were still unaware. They waited for the soldiers to come into contact with each other again before continuing to push forward. Although they were close to the enemy's city wall, they were still able to attack the soldiers in close range. However, they did not expect that the two heroes would go crazy this time. As long as they dared to attack, they would immediately chase after them. This time, the two of them attacked together, and each time they chased after half of the soldiers, they were extremely arrogant. When the two Star Masters wanted to counterattack, the two heroes immediately retreated. However, they could not chase after them. They were still under the enemy's city wall. The two Star Masters who were originally in high spirits finally began to experience the disgusting feeling of having their soldiers stuck under the enemy's tower. "So that's how it is. You planned this?" The young girl, no return, looked back at the city wall and suddenly felt enlightened. Gu Nan smiled and said, "Controlling the line is just a means. Do you know how much money they will lose in this wave?" The young girl, no return, shook her head honestly. However, she did not understand, but Gu Nan was very clear about it. In a wave of soldiers, each side had about 500 soldiers, and the real, valuable ones were about 1/20th of them. Before the soldiers died, a small number of them would be marked by the world. This marking was not obvious, and it required the heroes to observe it very carefully. The last hit of an ordinary soldier was only worth 1 hero coin, sometimes even nothing, while the marked soldiers were worth at least 30 hero coins. The total value of a wave of soldiers is about 1,000 hero coins, and the 25 valuable ones account for 3/4, Gu Nan said. "I call them marked soldiers." In the first wave of soldiers, the other side missed most of the soldiers in order to push the line. There were only a dozen marked soldiers in total, and they were divided between 2 people. As for me, out of the 16 that have already appeared, I've added 14. The smile on Gu Nan's face did not change as he pointed to the front and said, "In the remaining lines we can completely not miss a single one." The young girl, no return, looked between Gu Nan and the line of soldiers and said, "But if the other side continues to attack the small soldiers, when their next wave of soldiers comes, our city wall will be in danger." Controlling the line was most afraid of the other side pushing the line brainlessly. Although the young girl, no return, did not understand this, she had extremely rich combat experience and could analyze it herself. "We just need to get rid of one of them." Gu Nan seemed to have a card up his sleeve. "How do we do it?" Chapter 220. Grab the second was a common saying in competitive games, but under different rules, the word second had different meanings. The rule of the world of heroes was that as long as a soldier died, the nearby heroes would receive EXP, regardless of who killed the soldier. Therefore, the only way to grab the second was to push the line. In fact, when the first wave of the White Camp's line was cleared, the two opposing heroes had already leveled up to level 2. When heroes leveled up, there would be obvious changes to their bodies. Of course, Gu Nan and Mi Tian would not miss it. Unfortunately, due to Mi Luo's and Mi Tian's terrible last hits, they did not have the money to upgrade their skills. This was a very simple math problem. Upgrading a skill by one level required 1,000 hero coins, and every hero would receive 300 hero coins as a free gift. Therefore, to obtain one skill point, they only needed to earn 700 gold coins. Each wave of soldiers was worth 1,000 hero coins, but a level 1 hero could not kill every soldier, so they could only kill marked high-value soldiers. Ermi could kill about 5 marked soldiers, which was worth 150 hero coins. Including the ones that were given when they left and when they were free, they only had 500 hero coins on them. What about Gu Nan? As the marked soldiers fell one after another, the number of marked soldiers he had killed was close to 23, and he had 989 hero coins on him. The 2 marked soldiers that he had missed when he was adapting to the rhythm of the game had already been replenished by time. In front of the White Camp's wall, another soldier was about to die. A faint white light lit up on his body, which was a special mark from the world. Gu Nan's expression changed slightly. He was quite far away from the soldier, and under normal circumstances, he would definitely not be able to rush over. This was the reason why it was not easy to last hit in the early stages. It was a full 500 versus 500 line of soldiers that stretched for hundreds of meters. It was not controlled by a screen, so how could it be easy to last hit? This was a real battlefield, and it was not an exaggeration to say that everything changed in an instant. However, Gu Nan had no intention of letting it go. His figure disappeared instantly, and he appeared behind the soldier with a flash strike. This was his last hit, so how could he let it go? The power of shadow appeared for the first time, and the shadow sword suddenly appeared in Gu Nan's hand, which directly cut off the soldier's head. At the same time, Gu Nan's hero coins jumped to 1,019. Now that he was level 2, he bought a skill point as fast as he could and added it to Shadow Sword Overlay. Shadow Sword Overlay. Cast a Shadow Sword attack, dealing 3 times the damage to the target. This skill can only be used twice within a short period of time. It was just that the first level of Shadow Sword Overlay was obviously not as scary as Gu Nan's original version, and there was a limit to the number of times it could be used, but it was enough for now. In front of Mi Luo and Mi Tian's shocked gazes, Gu Nan used Flash Strike to appear behind Mi Luo. Seizing the opportunity, Gu Nan did not choose to use a skill immediately. Instead, he stabbed his sword at Milo's back. Gu Nan's movements were too sudden, so Milo didn't even have time to react until the sword stabbed into him. The moment the tip of the sword pierced through, Gu Nan finally used Shadow Sword Overlay. There was no need for Gu Nan to move. His body seemed to be controlled by some kind of power. The sword that he stabbed out was instantly retracted, and his arm stabbed at Mi Luo again. Only this time, the shadow sword was layered, like a shadow in the air, and slashed heavily on Mi Luo's back. Originally, it was impossible for Gu Nan to retract his sword and appear again so quickly, but he cleverly used a rule of the world of heroes. The skills here were generated by the world, and not controlled by the heroes themselves. In other words, the heroes only needed to click on the skill, and it would automatically be used. This was also a means to balance the Star Master, but now it was used by Gu Nan to cancel the backswing of the sword, to reset the general attack. Mi Luo, the old Star Master who was hit twice, finally couldn't help but roar. He quickly turned around, and the long sword in his hand was about to slash at Gu Nan. But Gu Nan's movements were faster than him, as if he had expected it. He used Flash Strike on the enemy in front of him again. This Flash Strike did not cause any displacement, but it successfully made him appear behind me Luo. The shadow sword in his hand stabbed out again, accurately piercing the wound. Immediately after, he followed up with the same shadow sword overlay and heavily slashed again. This time, the sword that had already cut open more than half of the wound was fatal to Star Master Mi Luo. The shadow sword that had been overlaid 3 times hit twice in a row, and there were also 2 general attacks in between. All of this was done in the instant that Gu Nan attacked. 4 strikes in an instant. The poor Star Master Mi Luo didn't even see his opponent. Half of his shoulder was cut off by the last strike, and his heart, which Gu Nan had been aiming at the whole time, was cut off and blood spurted out. After all, he was only a level 2 hero, which was equivalent to someone who had just entered the transcendent level. He wasn't in good condition either, so how could he withstand an attack like Gu Nan's? The old Star Master Mi Luo struggled for a while, and finally couldn't hold himself up any longer. He fell from midair. At the same time that he died, the blood curtain in the sky flashed, and a white light shone from the sky, piercing through the blood and shooting into Gu Nan's body. Gu Nan clearly saw that his hero coins had increased by another 500. One head was worth 500 coins, which was as good as a last hit. Brother! On the side, Lord of Sky covering Star only had time to cry out in shock. His figure flew towards Gu Nan, but the latter used another flash strike, and appeared behind the girl, no return. Shadow sword overlay and 4 consecutive flash strikes had drained most of Gu Nan's shadow power, so he had to stop and rest. When he looked over again, Star Master of Sky was gritting his teeth, but he didn't lose his cool and had no intention of coming up to die. He even backed off and landed. After all, he was a Star Master. He would be caught off guard by Gu Nan's scheme, but he wouldn't act impulsively. He would only die once, and it wasn't like he couldn't be resurrected. Also, Star Master of Sky was smart enough to choose to land. What a pity! Gu Nan couldn't help but shake his head. These Star Masters might not be familiar with the rules of the game, but they still had a good grasp of the situation. If he hadn't fallen, it wouldn't have taken long for you to kill him too, right? Girl No Return said. She was absolutely right. If Gu Nan could use Shadow Sword overlay to kill Star Master Mi Luo, his brother naturally couldn't escape. It was just that the enemy was prepared and needed more time. As long as Gu Nan recovered, it wouldn't be difficult for him to kill the enemy. But now that the enemy had chosen to land among the soldiers, the situation was different. Chapter 221. The World of Heroes was more like a holographic game from Gu Nan's previous life. It was completely different from a competitive game with a keyboard and mouse. One of the big differences was that, under normal circumstances, it was difficult for the soldiers to hit them. After all, the heroes were extraordinaires and had the ability to fly in the air. How could the soldiers on the ground hit them? Even long-range shooters would have their power reduced if they shot upwards. Normally, the heroes wouldn't cross the line easily. This meant that if they crossed the line too much, it would be easy for the enemy to circle around and force them to land. If they only crossed the line a little, it wouldn't actually affect them. Even if they attracted the hatred of the small soldiers, as long as they weren't entangled by the enemy, they had nothing to fear. That was why when Gu Nan controlled the line of soldiers under the tower, they could be so arrogant that the enemy couldn't land the last hit. They had their backs against the city wall. Even if they crossed the line, the second Mi couldn't surround them. It was because of this setting that when the Lord of Sky chose to land among the soldiers, he was protected by the line of soldiers. If Gu Nan tried to kill him now, the soldiers of the Black Camp wouldn't be polite. But if he did that, he wouldn't be able to land the last hit at all. Gu Nan said with a smile. At first, the heroes all chose to float in the air. Of course, it wasn't just to look cool. The vision in the air made it easier to observe the whole situation and see where to land the last hit. Once they were on the ground, they could only see their surroundings. The number of last hits they could land was very low. What do we do next? Do we still push the line? Young girl No Return seemed to have become a curious baby. She asked Gu Nan every step. She had gradually gotten used to Gu Nan's words, and the questions were very insightful. The Lord of Sky hid among the soldiers to protect himself and also to slow down the pace of pushing the line. If he attacked the soldiers unscrupulously, he might be ambushed by the enemy. Push the line, Gu Nan said without hesitation. The purpose of controlling the line was to delay the enemy's last hit or even kill the enemy. Now that the tactical goal had been achieved, what was the need to continue? While saying this, Gu Nan handed something to No Return. It was a basket full of long swords. These swords were all weapons used by mortals, and they were made of inferior quality. No Gui even felt like he could break them with a casual snap. "This is what you found in the camp?" "Yes." After getting an affirmative answer, young girl No Return looked at Gu Nan with a strange gaze. She waited until Gu Nan reached the line of soldiers before throwing her sword down. Under Gu Nan's monstrous strength and gravity, the sword, which was not sharp, actually pierced through an enemy's body. There seemed to be a moment of silence on the battlefield. The weapons falling from the sky made many people subconsciously raise their heads. When they saw Gu Nan's figure and recognized which side he belonged to, the white camp burst into cheers. On the other hand, the black camp's morale plummeted again after Milo's death. The difference between the world of heroes and a pure competitive game was reflected in every detail. Morale was also a very important factor. Previously, when the white camp was easily pushed out of the line, morale was also a factor. Isn't there transcendent suppression? Young girl No Return had already come to Gu Nan's side. She also tried to throw her sword down, and the result was the same. Transcendent suppression is suppressing our transcendent power. Gu Nan aimed at another enemy and casually stabbed him to death. And it was the sword that killed them, not us. Young girl No Return was startled. After thinking for a long time, she seemed to be right. Why didn't you use it before? It was the sword that killed them, and the money didn't belong to me, Baijan said. Shadow Song and Purple Lightning were still suppressing the enemy's line of soldiers, and they almost couldn't raise their heads. The city wall was being worn down bit by bit. It was not their first time entering the world of heroes. They might not have a deep understanding of the line control technique, but they could understand the basic principles. At this moment, their line of soldiers stopped in front of the enemy's city wall to ensure that the enemy would not dare to go out, and they could easily finish them off. At the same time, because of the advantage of the line of soldiers, they could organize an attack on the city wall every 2 waves of soldiers, causing great pressure on the black camp. This was the tactical intention that the 2 Star Masters, Mi Luo and Mi Tian, hoped to achieve. However, it was completely destroyed by Gu Nan's counterattack. Just as Shadow Song and Purple Lightning continued to attack, a white light suddenly flashed on the other side of the blood-red sky and landed on the white camp. Both veterans, Shadow Song and Purple Lightning, were stunned. They looked at each other in surprise and could not help but look in that direction. Of course, they understood that this was a sign that the enemy heroes had been killed. Those 2 were clearly veterans. How could they have died by their hands? The petite Shadow Song said as she flung her cloak. She didn't even bother to push the thread. Purple Lightning's face showed some helplessness. He also put away his sword and said, "The origin of Buddha is still clear. If there's someone who could do this, I'm afraid it's only that little guy." These 2 people who had lived for tens of thousands of years were not wrong to call Gu Nan that. The 2 of them were silent for a while. They did not know how Gu Nan had done it, so they became more and more curious about this mysterious guy. "What does that person mean by asking him to protect me?" Shadow Song casually stabbed his scimitar into his own body. The scimitar, Shadow Song, sank into Shadow Song's abdomen, but it did not cause any wound. Instead, it was like a drop of water falling into the sea, directly melting in. Purple Lightning just shook his head gently. She has been in charge of the star boundary for several eras and rarely interfered in the affairs of the inner world. This time, she made an exception. Although Purple Lightning was just calmly narrating, Shadow Song had been with him for many years and had long understood what he was talking about. There aren't many things that person would care about. There seemed to be a faint bloody light flashing in Shadow Song's eyes. That Gu Nan, he recognized me, this face. Black War Path. Gu Nan and the young girl No Return gave up on the economy of finishing off the enemy and used the dart method to push the line. The speed at which they cleared the line immediately increased by more than one level. Only someone like Gu Nan, who had finished off the marked soldiers, would dare to sacrifice their economy like this. Otherwise, pushing the line like this would not be worth it. If Gu Nan and No Return had only lost some economy, the Star Lord of Heaven wanted to cry but had no tears to shed. His older brother Milo had not been resurrected yet. He had originally hidden among the soldiers, thinking that he was temporarily safe, at least until the next wave of soldiers arrived. Who knew that these two fellows would actually find mortal weapons? When the soldiers of the Black Camp all fell, the Star Lord of Covering Heaven was also in a state of no way out. He could only watch as Gu Nan and the young girl No Return rushed towards him at the same time. Gu Nan even said something. Chapter 222. After successfully collecting the head of Star Lord of Sky, Gu Nan's hero coins had exceeded 1,000. Of course, young lady No Return did not compete with him for the kill. She could not possibly win against him. Although the experience was not enough for him to reach level 3, Gu Nan could purchase skill points to learn Body of the Evil God. In the hero's world, the skill level could not exceed the level of the hero. If Gu Nan had enough skill points, he could upgrade all 3 of his skills to level 2. Should we clear the second wave of troops before the other 2 arrive? Young lady No Return asked after seeing Star Lord of Sky's death. Gu Nan looked at her. He knew that a Star Lord like her had top-notch comprehension and learning abilities. She had only watched him deal with the troops a few times, but her understanding of the troops was already comparable to that of an average player. Under normal circumstances, taking advantage of the time when the enemy heroes were reviving to push the troops forward was indeed the best choice. However, this was clearly not the case. With 3 skills, Gu Nan had the ability to fight against 2 enemies at once. I will go to the back. Station the troops near the city wall, Gu Nan instructed young lady No Return. Station the troops. This was a new concept. Young lady No Return was startled. How do I do it? Do you remember how I controlled the troops? Yang Guang was very excited. The second wave of White Camp soldiers that he belonged to had been winning ever since they came to the front line, especially after Star Lord of Sky's death. As expected of a hero, after witnessing Gu Nan's heroic deeds, Yang Guang's impression of him had changed greatly. Bullying his own sister had suddenly turned into a hero who did not care about trifles. He was even glad that he did not question the other party. Quan, you are right. Yang Guang stood in the formation and killed another enemy soldier. He said to his brother Yang Quan, no matter what, he is still a hero. Yang Quan smiled bitterly. He understood what his brother meant, but it would be ridiculous to say that he had expected this. Moreover, compared to his brother, Yang Quan had read more books and had a better understanding of heroes. In the past, the deeds of the legendary heroes were not like this one. While the 2 were talking, a sharp whistle suddenly came from behind them. The 2 brothers turned around in shock. That sharp whistle came from the commander's camp, and the meaning of this whistle could not be clearer. Enemy attack. To be able to launch a sneak attack on the commander's camp. Could it be that the enemy had a third hero? Yang Guang and Yang Quan wanted to rush back immediately, but in the military camp, they could not move freely without orders. They could only wait anxiously. Fortunately, they didn't have to wait too long. The messenger soon arrived. Pass the military order. Everyone. The orderly's tone, which was supposed to be rhythmic, was filled with helplessness. Return to the camp. On the other side of the black battle path, the second wave of troops had already set off a long time ago. However, the resurrected me Luo Star-Lord was in no hurry to move. He had entered the world of heroes several times. Although he was not like young girl No Home and had a good teacher, like Gu Nan to learn from, he was not an idiot. The other party had used 2 skills to kill him instantly. After killing him and his younger brother, he could obtain another 1,000 hero coins. In other words, the other party already had 3 skills. Thinking of this, me Luo Star-Lord felt a headache. In order not to continue sending the other party's head, me Luo Star-Lord wisely did not advance immediately. Instead, he chose to wait for his younger brother. Me Luo Star-Lord died almost at the same time as him, so the time of his resurrection was naturally close. Soon, the 2 of them set off from the camp and began to head for the frontline city wall. Brother, that person probably has 3 skills. Should we wait at the city wall? The young-looking me Luo Star-Lord was not young at all when it came to handling matters. Instead, he was very cautious. Me Luo Star-Lord nodded. If the other party presses below our city wall, we'll follow them and wait for the 3rd wave of soldiers. Be careful. Me Luo Star-Lord roared, but he could not move in time. He could only watch as Gu Nan appeared instantly and slashed at his younger brother's back. Another 4 slashes in an instant. Moreover, it was 4 slashes with the power of the body of the evil god. The poor me Luo Star-Lord was chosen by Gu Nan to be the first target to be killed because he had a charging skill. His last thought was, "Why is he here?" Bai Zhan said. No matter which battle path it was, the speed at which troops were dispatched was the same. Shadow Song and me Luo had just used the 2nd wave of soldiers to cause a lot of damage to the enemy's city wall when 2 more white lights flashed across the blood-red sky. This time, 2 heroes had died one after the other. 2 more. This is really... Shadow Song's eyes seemed to be bloodshot. Even his pupils had turned blood-red, but he was so shocked by this scene that he turned around to look. Even before the 3rd wave of soldiers had arrived, the other party had already died 4 times. At this rate, it was as if the other party was sending themselves to their death. The 2 of them, who clearly had the geographical advantage, were only suppressing the other party and trying to wear down the city wall. After all, they were both Star Lords. Even if the other party was not familiar with the rules and did not cooperate much, they could still easily protect themselves. Looks like we can relax a little this time. Purple Lightning did not seem to care and was even happy to see it happen. Compared to me Luo and me Tian, this uncle and lowly duo clearly had a clearer division of labor. Shadow Song was responsible for attacking the enemy heroes, while Purple Lightning put more energy into finishing off the enemy. Although he was not as good as Gu Nan's invulnerability, he was still much better than Ermi. At this rate, he only needed 2 more waves of minions to get his first skill point. Just as the 2 of them were methodically finishing off the enemy and the 3rd wave of soldiers arrived, a voice suddenly sounded in their ears. "Clear the soldiers and prepare to cross the tower." Shadow Song and Purple Lightning looked down in astonishment. Even their movements paused for a moment as they found a familiar figure among the 3rd wave of soldiers. Gu Nan? Why is he here? Shadow Song almost threw the scimitar in her hand. This scene was really beyond her expectations. Although the hero's era did not limit the number of people in each battle path, it was almost the default rule to have 2 people per path. The reason was very simple. 2 people were more than enough to defend against 3 people, and if they supported each other, they would be able to escape. It was too difficult for a single person to defend against a 2-person siege, and if they were not careful, they could be killed directly. So, as long as one had a little common sense, it was impossible to assign 3 people to a path. However, Shadow Song quickly reacted. This time, it was not just 3 people. The other side had already sent out 4 people. If this advantage was concentrated on one person. Chapter 223. On the white path, the two heroes of Black Camp were two Star Lords who did not know each other. Star Lords did not team up to begin with, and the All-Heaven Star Path was filled with solo players. However, they were helpless when they encountered Shadow Song and Purple Lightning, who had great teamwork. It was not the first time the two from Black Camp had entered the world of heroes, so they knew very well that teamwork between two heroes would have a huge impact on the battle. So from the beginning, the two of them had the mentality of not wanting to win, but to not make mistakes, and just stayed within their own city walls. This tactic seemed to be very effective. At least so far, the two of them could only attack the city walls and could not do anything to them. However, when the third wave of troops arrived, this stalemate was broken. The two heroes were clearly still suspended in midair, but suddenly, a fluctuation of law appeared among the soldiers on the ground. Extraordinary power, it's a hero! One of the Star Lords was shocked, and just as he was about to warn his companion, he saw the one-eyed Star Lord next to him looking behind him in horror. Before he could move, he felt a sudden pain on his back, and a terrifying force almost sent him flying. This was not the end. He did not even have time to turn around, and a few more attacks came. The tearing pain made this Star Lord both shocked and angry. He knew that he did not have much chance of survival, but he could not figure it out. How could such a powerful opponent appear? This was his own city wall. He was not wrong. Almost at the same time he was killed, a beam of light suddenly shot out from the city wall and hit the enemy behind him. For heroes of this era, the attack power of the city wall was still quite impressive. Even if Gu Nan circled around and killed Mi Luo and Mi Tian, and successfully activated Evil God Body by level 2, he still could not withstand the damage from the city wall. The beam of light directly penetrated his chest, and the high-energy heat left a scorched black mark on Gu Nan's body. Even his tissues began to carbonize. However, he still had no intention of leaving, and his gaze shifted to the one-eyed Star Lord next to him. The latter's mouth twitched slightly. He had no way out, and could only raise his hand to attack. In the beginning, almost everyone would choose to use offensive skills in order to gain an advantage in the army, so this one-eyed Star Lord could only try to replace Gu Nan. Of course, that was impossible. Gu Nan, who was using all his skills, was much more agile than him. Before his opponent's attack arrived, Gu Nan had already flashed to his back and slashed repeatedly with his Sword of Shadow. But this time, his Shadow Sword overlay was on cooldown, so he had to endure another attack from the city wall. After taking 3 laser strikes in a row, Gu Nan finally succeeded in killing the one-eyed Star Lord, but he was already riddled with holes. I can't take it and I can't dodge it. He's really a transcendent killer. Gu Nan used up the last of his strength to escape with a flash strike. Most of the lasers on the city wall were composed of the power of laws, but they had the characteristic of breaking through laws. Most of the damage was directly inflicted on Gu Nan. Fortunately, Gu Nan had added 2 levels to his defensive skills. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to survive this attack. However, he earned another 1,000 hero coins and leveled up to level 3 due to the hero's EXP. This made Gu Nan feel gratified. Another 2 streaks of white light streaked across the sky. Shadow Song and Purple Lightning looked at each other helplessly. They finally understood why the other side died so miserably. This Gu Nan had clearly added 3 skills. He could kill the other side's hero single-handedly. During the entire tower crossing process, neither of them provided any help. At most, they helped push the line in, giving Gu Nan a chance to approach the other side. In the words of the game, Gu Nan, with 6 kills in his hands, was much more developed than the other side. In addition, he was an assassin-type skill set to begin with, which was why he was able to achieve such an incredible feat, but with your current injuries, I'm afraid it'll take a long time for you to recover, right? Shadow Song said as he looked at Gu Nan, who had returned. Gu Nan, who had continuously tanked the tower, seemed to be in quite a sorry state. The laser attacks on the wall had a scattering effect, so Gu Nan's entire left arm was practically covered in small holes. Just this appearance alone was enough to drive someone with trypophobia crazy. Although there was Hero's spring water in Hero's world, it was only used to revive heroes. It didn't have any effect to speed up recovery. Yeah, it'll take at least a few days for me to recover, Gu Nan agreed. The body of the evil god was very powerful, but without the triple recovery from Praise of Dawn, this kind of injury couldn't be healed quickly. Shadow Song secretly let out a sigh of relief. This Gu Nan wasn't invincible after all. But before she could finish speaking, Gu Nan's figure had already dashed out again, heading straight for the opposite wall, leaving behind these words. You guys continue pushing the tower, I'm going to send them off. When Gu Nan resurrected from the spring and returned to the Black War path, the young girl No Return fully executed his orders and gathered all the remaining troops in front of the wall. Now there were 4 white camp commanders standing beside No Return, which meant that there were already 4 waves of troops in front of the wall. Mi Luo and Mi Tian had returned to the front line and were looking at the white camp wall in confusion. They didn't know what method the other side was using to stop the soldiers in front of the wall, but this situation made them very uncomfortable. Their own soldiers kept entering the range of the wall, but they were killed by the enemy soldiers on the wall, while the enemy soldiers suffered very few casualties. Correspondingly, the two of them couldn't get any EXP or hero coins, so they could only watch as more and more troops gathered on the opposite side. They tried all kinds of methods, but they couldn't stop their own soldiers. Whether it was threats, promises, or reasoning, they couldn't stop these brainwashed fools. It wasn't until the 5th wave of troops that the two of them finally reacted. It was a commander. 2 distinguished heroes, what are you trying to do? The Black Camp commander, who was finally detained, glared at Mi Luo and Mi Tian. The old and young brothers looked at each other, thinking that if they knew what the other side wanted to do, they wouldn't be standing here. But in any case, they couldn't just sit back and watch their own soldiers die. At that moment, a shadow appeared on the opposite wall, and the obvious fluctuations of principle shocked the two of them at the same time. They knew very well that it was that guy who had returned. You've worked hard. Gu Nan looked down with satisfaction at the 4 waves of troops that had been gathered. Why did you take so long to come back this time? The young girl No Return was a little surprised. She had seen the white light in the sky a long time ago. Gu Nan didn't say that he had returned to the city for free and had wasted some time, instead just saying, let them go, this time we'll go straight to the high ground. How? Chapter 224. Near the white camp wall, the 2 armies that were originally confronting each other quietened down at the same time. Commander! The commander of the white camp. For the soldiers of the black camp, this was their goal. This was military merit, this was glory. At this moment, whether it was their own commander or the enemy below the wall, they couldn't resist their desire for military merit. As long as one person took the lead, the rest of the soldiers would pounce on him like wolves. Needless to say, the white camp would be forced to stay near the city walls because 4 of their commanders had been detained. Kill! Save the commander! Charge with me! Battle cries rang out from both sides at the same time. The soldiers from both sides didn't stop and clashed head-on. Thus, the advantage of the white camp's 4 waves of soldiers was quickly revealed. Due to the lack of effective command, the black camp's formation was quickly infiltrated. Almost every soldier of the black camp was facing a situation of 1 against 2, or even 1 against 3. Brother, let's retreat quickly. Star-Lord Mi Tian immediately knew that the situation was bad and said hurriedly. The other side suddenly threw out the commanders and caused a decisive battle. How could the two of them not understand the intention of the other side when they thought about the shadow that was suspected to be Gu Nan? This was a guy with 4 heads in his hands. No one could resist him at this stage. They still didn't know that Gu Nan had just taken the time to gank and took 2 more heads on the white battle path. Otherwise, he would have run even faster. Star-Lord Mi Luo's expression didn't look good either. He retreated with his brother without saying a word, but he didn't think it was a good idea. After all, once they moved against the line of soldiers, it was equivalent to exposing themselves. But for some reason, Gu Nan didn't appear even after they retreated to the bottom of the black camp wall. Finally, the two of them felt relieved. Gu Nan, who had already taken 6 heads, was indeed not in a hurry to kill them. Or rather, he had more important things to do. Do you see that soldier? He had a clear mark before he died. Killing him is worth 30 hero coins. You didn't see that clearly? Are you blind? Student No Return's face darkened. Under Gu Nan's guidance, she quickly learned how to deal the finishing blow. In fact, she was already a fast learner, but Gu Nan's requirements were indeed a little too high. However, it wouldn't do if it wasn't high, because Gu Nan's goal was for her to obtain the second skill point in this wave of minions. As a professional player, Gu Nan knew very well that in order to win, he had to give up a portion of his income when his development had already exploded. Moreover, he wouldn't suffer a loss if he gave the money to young girl No Return because her defensive skill was a godly tower crossing skill. Buddha's Heart Protection blocks the next incoming damage and reduces subsequent damage by 50%. This skill cannot be used on the same target within a short period of time. Active defensive skills weren't common, but they were undoubtedly powerful. Under Gu Nan's hands-on guidance, young girl No Return finally managed to recruit enough soldiers to barely gather 1,000 hero coins. Gu Nan could not help but secretly wipe the cold sweat off his forehead. Unfortunately, there was no such thing as an assist in the world of heroes. Otherwise, he wouldn't have to work so hard. While guiding young girl No Return, Gu Nan did not forget to seize the time to push the lines and try to protect his own 4 waves of minions. Whether or not they could destroy the opposite wall would depend on them. Under the black camp's wall, Mi Luo and Mi Tian looked ahead with solemn expressions as a large wave of white camp soldiers rushed over. The last wave of minions for today hasn't arrived yet. It seems that we can only try our best to defend. Mi Luo rubbed the wrinkles on his face and said solemnly. Mi Luo Star-Lord snorted coldly. That guy is indeed very powerful, but his mistake is that he shouldn't have exposed the method of accumulating soldiers. To think that this method could be used to accumulate soldiers. When the 2 Star-Lords first discovered this, their shock was indescribable. This was simply subverting the rules of the entire world of heroes. Once this method was learned by more people, in the future battles of the world of heroes, everyone would gather a large wave of soldiers and then fight to the death. Even now, it was the same. Mi Luo Star-Lord sneered. As long as we can survive today, we will gather 6 waves of minions tomorrow and move out together. He's just asking for trouble. Once everyone gathered 6 waves of minions, it would obviously be more difficult for the other party to display their overly strong individual strength, and they would also have time to develop. When everyone had 3 skills, the other party would not be able to be so arrogant. The 2 Star-Lords' calculations were very accurate, but just as the white camp soldiers were about to reach the city wall, a panting voice sounded. Be careful. The 2 turned their heads and saw their companion, the one-eyed Star-Lord, who was supposed to be on the white battle path, rushing over. One-eyed Star-Lord, who did not have any teleportation skills, had to rely on his own 2 legs to run over, and even flying was too slow. The one with the sword on the opposite side can kill people on the city wall. One-eyed Star-Lord saw the soldiers on the opposite side and shouted without even bothering to greet them. As for the specific words of One-eyed Star-Lord, Mi could no longer hear them clearly. This was because at the same time when the voice was heard, the horrifying fluctuation of the rule had already appeared behind them, and the words that floated over from afar could only be heard clearly on the city wall. The pitch-black shadow sword fell, and this time, Gu Nan did not need to use the operation of resetting his basic attack, and directly using 2 skills was enough to kill one person. Seeing that the figure appeared again and instantly killed the hero on his side in front of him, One-Eyed Star-Lord almost wanted to beat his chest and stamp his feet. Just a little bit more time, if only he had arrived earlier. I'll fight you to the death. This roar came from me, Luo Star-Lord. This time, it was his turn to watch his brother get instantly killed, and the annoyance of being crushed by others finally surged in his heart. However, in this world, a small explosion of the universe was never enough to solve the problem. The economic gap was too big, and even if Gu Nan and his opponent were from different places, he could not think of a good solution, let alone these Star Lords who were not familiar with the game. In just a moment, the Shadow Sword suddenly fell, and Mi Luo Star Lord followed in his brother's footsteps, contributing a head to Gu Nan. Another 2 heads, and another 1,000 hero coins. As of now, Gu Nan already had 8 heads in his hands, and according to the calculation in the game, he was now in the state of super god. Of course, there would not be such a boring thing in the hero world, and the Star Lords would not care about such glory, they only cared about victory. After beheading Mi Luo Star Lord with 1 sword, Gu Nan suffered another 3 laser attacks. Even with the Buddha's heart protection surrounding his body, which blocked most of the damage, the price of crossing the tower at this time was still too high, and Gu Nan was like an arrow at the end of its flight. Chapter 225. Under Black Camp's wall, Gu Nan had already used Flash Strike to return to Girl No Return's side. He looked at the opposite wall and sighed. There's a problem, there's a third person. Gu Nan was talking about the One-Eyed Star-Lord. After another wave of solo tower hopping, he was once again left with a serious injury and could no longer attack that person. Moreover, Buddha's heart protection had a cooldown and could not be used on him for a period of time. It's someone from the combat path? No Return quickly reacted and raised her eyebrows. Gu Nan nodded and did not speak. These Star-Lords were indeed not simple characters. Even if they were temporarily suppressed by his experience, their understanding of the situation would not fall. After the One-Eyed Star-Lord was defeated by him, he quickly thought that the same thing would happen here, so he hurried over. However, he was a step too late. Even so, he still brought a lot of trouble to Gu Nan, because in the upcoming siege, there was no hero to help defend the city. The difference was simply unreasonable. I'll take the attack from the wall and kill him, No Return said without hesitation. She also understood the logic, so even if she had to sacrifice her life, she had to kill the opponent's hero. As long as that person died, there was hope for the city to be breached. However, Gu Nan shook his head lightly. He knows we can cross the tower, why would he still stay on the wall? No Return was startled. When she turned her head to look, the One-Eyed Star-Lord was indeed gone. She frowned and looked down. The 2 sides had already started fighting. It seemed like the opponent was hiding in the soldiers. Even without the line of soldiers, there were still a small number of soldiers stationed inside the wall. This was also the last defense force. If there was no enemy hero, Gu Nan and No Return could quickly clear these soldiers and participate in the siege. We'll press in front of the line of soldiers. If he dares to show himself, you use your skill to steal the aggro, I'll kill him. Gu Nan said to No Return, if he doesn't come out, we'll clear the line. Without the last line of soldiers, the One-Eyed Star-Lord would have no place to hide. So, the 2 of them went to the front of the line of soldiers, attacking the enemy soldiers while also paying attention to the enemy's movement. However, this time, the 2 of them were out in the open. From time to time, there would be law fluctuations coming from the front lines. By the time the 2 of them wanted to search, the enemy had already disappeared. What is he doing? The young girl, No Return, frowned. She couldn't understand why the other party would pop up from time to time, but didn't do anything substantial. Could it be that it interfered with their clearing efficiency? It's a last hit, Gu Nan said with a sullen face. Even in such a chaotic situation, he still discovered the true purpose of the One-Eyed Star-Lord. He should have quite a few last hits over there. Gu Nan looked at the law fluctuations that appeared once again and said, "He wants to wait until he gets his second skill. That way, even if he attacks us head-on, it's not impossible." Gu Nan was very clear that the reason he could suppress these Starlords was because they had no skills, or rather, only learned one offensive skill. Once the opponent's skills became more plentiful, Gu Nan would no longer be able to achieve such an instant kill. Within the city walls, if he couldn't achieve an instant kill, it would mean that he couldn't do anything to the opponent. The young girl, No Return, frowned. She realized that the opponent's choice was very crafty. It was right on their weak point. If they allowed the opponent to pass through this wave of troops, then their advantage would not be that great. She pondered for a moment before saying, "I'll go and lure." "No need," Gu Nan interrupted her. "If this person wants to compete with me in last hits, then let's compete." Yang Guang was already standing under the Black Camp's city wall. He raised the spear in his hand and shouted excitedly. He had been learning martial arts since young. His martial arts skills were well known in the village. It was just that he didn't have the chance to step onto a bigger stage. Now, he finally had the chance. "Kill. Follow me and kill." Yang Guang pointed the spear in his hand. Instantly, a few soldiers charged forward with him. Naturally, this included his younger brother, Yang Quan. The world of heroes' battle formation was rarely controlled as a whole. When it came to battles, most of them would fight in small teams. Due to Yang Guang's previous outstanding performance, he had been appointed as a team leader on the way here. He had 6 soldiers under his command. "Ah Guang, retreat for a moment." Yang Quan's voice could be heard from behind. Even though Yang Guang was the team leader, he did not doubt his younger brother's judgment. He retreated without hesitation and even called for his comrades to follow him. Indeed, not long after they retreated, the enemy's formation suddenly shrunk. The enemies in front of them suddenly became denser. If they didn't retreat in advance, they would have been surrounded. "Ah Guang, you're really something." One of his comrades patted Yang Quan's shoulder and praised him with a smile. Yang Quan's fair face revealed a peaceful smile, but he didn't say a word. Unlike his brother, Yang Guang, Yang Quan's martial arts skills weren't that outstanding. However, he was well versed in military books since young. He was very familiar with the changes in the battle formation and the situation. He was the best candidate to be the commander. Just as he was about to arrange for his men to reinforce the formation, he heard a groan coming from the front. "Ah Guang?" Yang Quan looked up and his eyes widened. It was a stray arrow that came from nowhere. It landed on Yang Guang's abdomen and entered his body. The rest of the team panicked. They quickly pulled Yang Guang back and protected him in the middle. "Ah Guang, are you all right, Ah Guang?" Yang Quan shook Yang Guang's body, trying to wake him up. If he were to faint at this moment, it would be the end of him. Yang Guang covered his wound with one hand and vomited blood. Even his eyes looked like they were about to lose focus. Yang Quan was about to go crazy. He forcefully took off his battle robe and tried to stop his brother's bleeding. However, it was useless. Vaguely, he saw an inexplicable light rising above his brother. "This is..." Yang Quan looked up in shock. He had never seen such a thing before. At this moment, an inexplicable wave appeared beside the two of them. A one-eyed man appeared. He was the one-eyed Star Master of the Black Camp. "Another one." The one-eyed Star Master chuckled. His eyes were filled with gratification. Of course, he had also noticed the world mark. He was obviously satisfied with the 30 hero coins that he had earned. Yang Quan did not recognize the other party. However, the strange wave made him realize the other party's identity immediately. Hero. It was the enemy's hero. His severely injured brother was still in his arms, and the enemy was right in front of him. Such a hopeless situation made Yang Quan fall into deep despair. At this moment, Yang Quan hoped that the hero would appear in time to save them. However, His rationality told him that in such a chaotic battle, even His Excellency the hero would be helpless. Would there be a miracle? Yang Quan could not help but look up. He saw Gu Nan's figure still hanging high in the sky. However, he seemed to have noticed the situation here. He waved his hand and shot a ray of black light towards Yang Quan. Yang Quan's heart was suddenly filled with hope. Even if he could only block the opponent for a while, the hero would have the chance to rush over. The one-eyed Star Master sneered in his heart. As a Star Master, he knew better than Yang Quan that the opponent was simply using the passive principle. It would not affect him at all, even if it was used on an ordinary soldier. Chapter 226. The battlefield below the city wall seemed to have fallen into silence for a moment, and this stagnant situation gradually disappeared as Yang Guang's head fell to the ground. The frozen scene was unfrozen once again. In the chaotic battlefield, this seemed to be just a small interlude. Only the few people involved realized what it meant. One-eyed Star-Lord was almost dumbfounded. He had never thought that a hero would actually attack his own soldiers just to hinder the other party's finishing blow. In reality, these Star-Lords had never paid enough attention to the last hit. This could also be seen from the actions of Mi Luo and Mi Tian. Obviously, it would not be too bad if they wanted to finish off the enemy, but they chose to focus on killing. After all, in a real war, there was no such thing as killing the enemy's soldiers first and leaving the main general alone. However, One-Eyed Star-Lord was a Star-Lord after all. After being stunned for a moment, he quickly reacted and his figure quickly disappeared. In any case, the other party had already brought him enough surprises. One more wouldn't make a difference. Besides, if he didn't leave now, he might end up like Yang Guang. If One-Eyed Star-Lord was only surprised that there was such a thing, then Yang Quan's worldview was about to collapse. He was a more rational person than his brother, Yang Guang, so he had a higher tolerance for some of the outrageous actions of Sir Hero. However, what he could not tolerate did not include attacking his own soldiers, especially when the target was his brother. Anger suddenly broke through Yang Quan's mind. He felt as if something had broken. Something was clearly wrong in the past, but he did not know why he had ignored it. Now it all came to his mind. Hoarding soldiers and attacking together would be more effective. Why didn't he think of such a simple principle? Even he was familiar with military books. There were so many commanders and generals in the camp. Why did they have to send out a small number of soldiers every time? Why did the white camp and the black camp have to fight each other for no reason? Why couldn't they just sit down and talk? No one could answer Yang Quan's questions. These were all unimaginable things, but they seemed to have been ignored by everyone. Yang Quan was on the blood-splattered battlefield, but his heart was cold. He raised his head and looked into the distance. In the blood-red sky as usual, it was as if there was an invisible hand controlling everything. No matter what Yang Quan thought, it was normal for Gu Nan to counterattack. He didn't mind using this method to suppress One-Eyed Star-Lord's follow-up attack. As long as the One-Eyed Star-Lord didn't have enough sabers before the city guards were cleared out, he wouldn't dare to appear in front of them. Then, the siege wouldn't be affected. Boom! Gu Nan slashed another shadow sword at the city wall. Even with the transcendent suppression, the obvious tremors showed the damage the city wall had suffered. The large amount of hero and soldier EXP allowed Gu Nan to reach level 4, which was equivalent to the Downlord realm in the outside world. If he could reach the 5th level, he would be able to break the world again. At the same time, he would be able to get the big move Justice Judgment. His fighting power would have a qualitative change. However, the amount of experience required for this level was more than the previous 4 levels combined. For the time being, there was no chance. One-Eyed Star-Lord was still hiding among the city guards. Ever since Gu Nan made his move, he couldn't get a good follow-up attack. He was perfectly suppressed by Gu Nan's counterattack. The number of White Camp soldiers that died in Gu Nan's hands was more than 10, and One-Eyed Star-Lord's space of activity was further reduced. Until the last soldier fell, One-Eyed Star-Lord had nowhere to hide. He had no choice but to retreat to the back of the city wall. The city wall might not be able to hold, but he wasn't stupid enough to die with it. On the white battle path, Shadow Song and Purple Lightning fought for a while. They retreated to the back and waited for the last wave of soldiers to arrive. They were already familiar with this. In the past, when they entered the hero era, it was a similar situation. However, in the blood-red sky, a white firework suddenly exploded. It was beautiful and eye-catching. Shadow Song and Purple Lightning looked over there in shock. The white firework meant that the Black Camp's city wall was destroyed. However, the city wall here was still intact. There was only one possibility. He took down the city wall in just one day? Shadow Song couldn't hide the surprise in his eyes. This was completely illogical. If it was Gu Nan who killed the enemy heroes, it was possible that he was too strong. But how did he break through the city wall? At this stage, no matter how powerful a hero was, he couldn't withstand more than a few laser attacks from the city wall. Unless a large number of soldiers arrived at the city wall at the same time. Purple Lightning's face was also filled with doubt. However, his judgment was quite close to the truth. Shadow Song was silent for a while. Then, she said in a low voice, "We need to work hard too. There's only one person on the other side." With the tacit understanding between the two of them, Purple Lightning naturally understood what she was talking about. On the black battle path, after Gu Nan broke through the city wall, there were still many White Camp soldiers left. They continued to advance toward the Black Camp's headquarters. At this moment, two rays of light flashed in the sky at almost the same time, one white and one black. Gu Nan looked up and couldn't help but smile. This was the sacrifice of one person on the other side, forcefully swapping out the enemy hero. One-Eyed Star Master came here to report, so there was only one person left to defend. Once he was swapped out, the city wall would be in trouble again. The terrain of the world of heroes wasn't complicated. After the city wall was pushed down, the Black Camp's main gate was basically open, waiting for Gu Nan and the others to visit. Only about a wave of White Camp soldiers were left. The camp gate, which was far inferior to the city wall, couldn't stop them at all. Countless Black Camp citizens fled in all directions. It felt as if the devil had entered the village. However, the White Camp soldiers were clearly disciplined. Even in the face of the Black Camp, which had a feud with them, they didn't have any intention of wantonly killing. Instead, they headed straight for the barrack. Soldiers kept pouring out of the Black Camp. They were the garrison of the Black Camp's headquarters. Young girl No Return was about to go over to help, but was pulled back by Gu Nan. "There are too few soldiers. We can't kill them all at once. We'll go and cause trouble." "How?" "Murder and arson," Gu Nan said coldly. "These soldiers saw their loved ones killed and their homes burned. How can they stay calm? We'll wait for them to scatter into the barracks. They'll be exhausted from running for their lives. Only when there's no military formation left can we make our move." Young girl No Return nodded. "Makes sense. Despicable and shameless." Another voice came from behind them. It was a young man who had heard Gu Nan's words and was staring at him angrily. It was Yang Quan. At this moment, Yang Quan's hair was disheveled and his eyes were bloodshot. He felt as if his whole body was about to fall apart. There seemed to be something in his heart that was about to burst out. Chapter 227. Wulin Chinese Network, the latest chapter of Crossing the Heavens and Becoming an Evil God. Interesting. Gu Nan gave such an evaluation. A person dissipating, and a law at that. What did this mean? Either this person had completely become a law, and his life essence had entered a whole new level, or he was originally made of laws and was about to disintegrate. Ever since entering the hero's world, Gu Nan, who seemed to know everything, was finally attracted. This made Girl No Return feel more at ease. The heavenly star path, or the inner world, is like this. No Return said, everything here is made of laws, so it can be infinitely reset, always corresponding to the real plane of the surface world. Gu Nan nodded lightly, thought for a moment and said, there are some planes of the surface world that can automatically reset. Are they also related to the inner world? Yes. No Return seemed to have a rare opportunity to be a teacher. At the junction of the surface world and the inner world, there will be some small planes with chaotic laws, causing the outside and the inside to be reversed. Back when Gu Nan first entered the astral world and was taken to the Tower of Light, he had seen a plane that could be reset. At that time, the people in the Tower of Light had their own understanding, of course, completely different from what Girl No Return said. Considering the level of both sides, Gu Nan was naturally more willing to believe No Return. Insignificant people looking at the world was like a blind man touching an elephant. They could only see a small part of the essence, the rest depended on guessing. The two talked like there was no one else around, and did not seem to avoid Yang Quan at all. But the information revealed in their conversation gave Yang Quan a splitting headache. He seemed to understand something, but also like he did not understand anything. The fragmented information circled his mind bit by bit, as if something was about to come out, but was suppressed by an invisible force. Fortunately, Yang Quan did not need to worry about it very soon. Gu Nan had already pierced his chest, and then threw him into the residential area of the Black Camp. An unstable body of laws like him was the most suitable to be a human bomb. Sure enough, not long after, when the part of Yang Quan that was human completely disappeared, the power of laws in his body was no longer restrained, and suddenly exploded. An energy storm that only extraordinaires could sense silently swept through the Black Camp. Once mortals came into contact with it, they would be eroded and shattered in the blink of an eye. Even the surrounding buildings would not be spared. You've helped us a lot, Gu Nan said with a smile. Originally, he wanted to stir up trouble himself. Now that he had done this, the effect was better than he had expected. Before young girl Wugue could speak, the blood-colored sky suddenly darkened, and the scene in front of Gu Nan instantly disappeared. When he reappeared, Gu Nan was already in a pitch-black void. Around him were his three companions, Wugue, Shadow Song, and Violet Lightning. Aya, did those four guys on the other side quit? What a wise choice. When Shadow Song saw this scene, he immediately came back to his senses and laughed. The city wall was breached in a single day. There's not much hope left. The handsome uncle, Purple Bolt, shook his head helplessly. It's better to retreat earlier. That way we can save some astral world essence. Hearing their conversation, Gu Nan and No Return understood, but Gu Nan understood even more. They were surrendering. Or perhaps they had just resurrected and happened to see the energy storm erupt in the camp. Their morale was about to drop. Naturally, Gu Nan was happy to see this move that saved everyone trouble. Dungeon Main Storyline Quest completed. Main Storyline Evaluation. A. Sub-Storyline Development Rate. B. Map Exploration Rate. B. Sin Rating. B. General Evaluation, B+. Accumulated Points, 350. Accumulated Sin Rating, 50. Inside the Evil God's Temple, the long-awaited dungeon completion system notification finally appeared. However, the reward made Gu Nan frown. The reason he frowned was, why was it so little? Ever since he had reached Tier 4, he had rarely encountered double-digit rewards. After all, the difficulty of a dungeon corresponded to the player's level. This didn't make sense. Originally, Gu Nan already had 1,350 Sin rating. He had been hoping to break through the 1,500-point barrier this time. Then, with a few more points, he could activate the third law. He did not expect the world of heroes to be so stingy. Purple Lightning saw Gu Nan's expression and seemed to understand what he was thinking. He said, in a plane group like the world of heroes, the origin elements that can be distributed are incomplete. The lower the rank, the more this is the case. To the celestial lords, the world origin was what they needed the most. The reason he came to the starry path of the inner world was to plunder the origin source and replenish the astral world he controlled. This time, young lady No Return was clear. The plane group has thinned the origin, but they complement each other. The more they steal, the more complete the origin. Gu Nan didn't quite understand what she was saying, but the meaning was clear. This was a chain of multiple quests. The more they completed, the higher the reward. That's it for this time. Shadowsong, who only reached Violet's waist, concluded, I'll need some time to adjust my ability to bring you to the inner world. I'll let you know next time. When is the next time? Gu Nan asked. About 5 years from now. After saying this, she looked at Gu Nan with a, are you kidding me, expression and shrugged. For existences like us, that's already very fast. Uncle Purple Lightning also came up and patted Gu Nan on the shoulder. He smiled. We're people who can coexist with the world. There's no need to worry about things like time. Young lady No Return wasn't surprised at all. She and Gu Nan had previously argued about the concept of time. Gu Nan took a deep breath. Being able to go to the starry path of the heavens was Shadowsong's unique ability. If he couldn't force her, then he could only give up. However, he felt like he really needed to adjust his concept of time. In the game in his previous life, players couldn't spend hundreds of years doing certain things because they didn't have that kind of lifespan. But now he did. The current Gu Nan was still a player, but he was already one with an extremely long lifespan. Outside of the rules of the game that he was familiar with, he could search for and study some visible patterns that might also help him grow, such as the inner world. After returning to the astral world, the four were still on planet Jade Flower. Shadowsong and Violet Lightning had disappeared in the blink of an eye. The Shadowsong of the surface world was still a powerless little girl. She didn't dare to expose herself for too long. On the other hand, when young lady No Return returned, she looked at Gu Nan and asked, Are you interested in finding trouble with some people? In the past, she probably wouldn't have cared about Gu Nan at all. But after this trip to the hero world, Gu Nan's existence seemed to have become an established fact. Who? Gu Nan raised an eyebrow. Shanghai Pavilion. If you wanted to read some light novels, go to Apex Novel Network.